Welcome to the very first meeting of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee of the City of Toronto. This is a historic day. My name is Michael Thompson, and I am the chair of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee. I will be joined by a co-chair a little bit later on in the meeting. I'm really happy to be here. The committee secretary has confirmed that we have a quorum, so I would like to call the very first meeting of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Committee to order. I want to again just welcome every member who is joining this committee, as well as all of the staff who are part of this particular process. And of course, the committee secretary, Jonathan, who is you've heard speaking. Congratulations to all of you who have been selected in order to pursue this really important piece of work. And I'm just delighted that you're all here. Again, congratulations. This meeting is being held using the WebEx technology with members of staff connecting by videos or in fact calling in. Because we are in fact meeting remotely, we ask certainly for your patience because with technology, there's always something going wrong and so on. So any delays or any technical issues that arises, again, we ask for your patience. Members of the public can watch the meeting, which is being streamed live on YouTube at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. We do not have any registered public speakers at today's meeting. I would like to remind all of our staff and invited participants to keep your mics muted and your videos turned off unless you need to address the committee. I'm going to say, though, quite frankly, not sure why staff have to turn their videos off because there's not that many of you. There is a complimentary number and so on, but I'm going to vary that process and say, keep your videos on, quite frankly. I actually want to be able to see the staff members and so on. So I know that this makes it easier for me to see the people and for people watching to see that we want to make sure that they see the debate and so on, and that we are able to vote on agenda items and so on. But I think I want to suggest that we keep our videos on, and if there is a problem, then we could respond to that by turning them off a little bit later. But I'm going to insist that you mute your microphone, though. So I just want to remind any of the members of the advisory committee that to keep your mics muted. When there is an opportunity for you to ask staff a question and or to speak on an item, then you can unmute your mic. Members, if you wish to ask the staff questions and or, as I said, to speak, then of course, unmute your mic. Otherwise, I think that will be fine. Just want to draw your attention on the fact in terms of voting on motions. I would ask you to ensure that your video is turned on in as much as we're talking about that. So if you had your video turned off and you were to be voting on something, you would not be able to vote because I couldn't see your raised hands. And it would be helpful for me to be able to see you when you're voting, whether or not you're voting in favor or opposed to a matter that we have on the agenda. I want to remind you that although we are participating remotely, if there is any motions that you have, quite frankly, I'm not sure, Mr. Clerk, in terms of how this piece has been set up for members who are part of this committee. So I'm not sure if they're set up in a way that we do at council, where we're able to move motions and write the motions and submit it and so on. But we can discuss that a little bit later on, and that's a curiosity that I have, and maybe just have the clerk speak to that just before we do the run through of the agenda. Although we are in different locations and meeting remotely today, The Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I must ask then, are there any declaration of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Just looking to see, I don't know if any members have any conflict of interest. I'm looking, I don't see any hands. And if I don't see your hands, and if you had a conflict of interest, if you could just unmute yourself, please, and let me know. I'll just wait another second or two. Yeah, I think the silence suggests that we don't. Mr. Clerk, just before we proceed with respect to going through the 9 items that we have on the agenda, if a member of committee were to have a motion that they would like to move, how would they do that? Can you provide an explanation, please? Would it be simply verbally and staff would record it, or is there some mechanism that would allow the 14 other members of the committee to submit motions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ideally, we would like members to submit their motions ahead of time and by email at kbrock@toronto.ca, and so that we can, the clerk staff, we can do in advance so that when voting is on, we can display the motion on the screen. But if, sometimes it depends on how the discussion goes. If a member wants to move a motion, the clerk staff, we will try our best to capture the motion and write it down, and we will display the motion for the committee.
Fair enough. That's very helpful. I hope that that's clear to all members. And I guess it's more for future meetings as such, where you have had the chance to review the agenda and you have motions that you would like to attach to a specific item on the agenda. And so I'm sure that we'll be able to work through that. So moving right along, I'm just going to do a quick run through the agenda and then sort of come back to the items and so on, so that we can proceed with them. And then I will start by just reading out the first item, which is CR 1.1, welcome remarks and introduction of committee members and staff. We'll get to that in a moment. The next item is CR 1.2, appointment overview and expectations of public members. CR 1.3, city governance overview and the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee. CR 1.4, meeting process and the simplified rules of procedure in terms of how these meetings will be conducted. CR 1.5, election of a co-chair. CR 1.6, context on the formation of the Confronting Anti-Racism Advisory Committee. CR 1.7, overview of Confronting Anti-Racism Unit, its structure and it works, how it works, and work. Then finally, actually we have 2 more items, which is CR 1.8, Provincial Anti-Racism Directorate. We have a guest as part of this item, as well as we have the Federal Anti-Racism Secretariat, and we also have a guest, and I'll ask staff to introduce those individuals when we come to the item. Members and staff, this is an historic day. This is an opportunity that, in my time here as a politician on council, I have not seen or have experienced. The mayor of Toronto, David and John Tory, did focus his attention on working with council to establish the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit for the City of Toronto, which is a body that is embedded into the structure and the fabric of the city to deal with issues as it relates to anti-Black racism, which we know exists. And it's really important for us to recognize that where there is a problem, to recognize the problem, and then find ways and methods in terms of dealing with the problem. This is the action that has led council to develop this unit, led by some outstanding individuals, and you'll be meeting them shortly. Some of you may have met them already, and I will concur with me that they're absolutely outstanding in terms of their brilliance, the work that they do to bring this matter to life and to inform our city council with respect to direction, to incorporate policy directive in terms of dealing with this issue. We're all in this together, the city council, along with the city manager, Chris Murray, the mayor and staff and team are committed to addressing the issues surrounding anti-Black racism and the challenges that members of the Black community face, certainly in this city, and certainly we know that's beyond. Racism is not a new phenomena. It's a phenomena it's something that's been out there long before any of us here on this committee were born, or many of the staff members. But we are working now to address it. This, by the way, this unit for the City of Toronto, it's the first of its kind in North America, probably the world, quite frankly. And I've spoken with people around the world around what they're doing with respect to confronting anti-Black racism. I have not been informed by others that there has been such an organization, such a structure that has been put in place. We know that, this is the decade for it's the international decade for people of African descent. And the question is, what is your city doing to address the issues that are faced on a daily basis by members of the Black community? And let me be very clear. I understand that racism is not just a condition that affects the Black community. It is beyond. But our focus with respect to this committee is to focus specifically on anti-Black racism as it affects the community. The city is looking at working to address this, and it can't do it alone. Quite frankly, if it was just left to the city, I don't believe that we would be able to succeed. What is really important about the work that you're about to embark upon as we start this first meeting of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee, it's groundbreaking. It is work that is extremely important. You are being asked to provide your voice, your input, your experience, your lived experiences to the process that will inform Toronto City Council, which is made up of 26 people, the mayor and 25 members of council. Through the staff process, this information will be directed into the institution. And the objective there is to obviously formulate policies that will help the Black community on a variety of different issues: housing, transit, issues around health, public health, issues around education, in as much as the city doesn't control education, but there are elements there that we bring into the system that allows for the advocacy to take place. We know as well there are a lot of different types of elements within our community. There are the members of the queer community, members of the, we have different types of people who refer to themselves as being Black, whether or not you're from the Caribbean or Africa or Toronto or any other place in the world where Black people come from. We're here. We want to affect the change so that the making of a better life for all people of color in this, all Black people in this city takes place, and it has to be rooted in the work that you're doing. And I'm looking forward to working with all of you in order to effect the needed changes. Many of you may have children or grandchildren and so on. The work that we're doing today isn't simply for us. It's foundational, it's a structure, it has to take roots, and it has to formulate itself in a way that it not only affects the city organization and departments, but much wider in this entire city of Toronto. And certainly we're hoping that some of the learn experiences and the ideas that comes from you can be extrapolated and utilized in a global fashion, because I think that the work that you're about to embark on today is of that caliber to ensure that we are going to make a difference and address this issue around racism in the Black community. I haven't talked specifically about things like policing and all of the other elements. I'm sure that as we unpacked all of these things will come out. But I'm really looking forward to your input and your leadership. And again, I congratulate all of you who have been selected to this important body, because the work that you're going to do is going to be of great importance and value to the progression and to the success and the development of the Black community in Toronto. You, as members of the advisory committee, will inform City Council through your direction how to make this city a better city for Blacks, and of course, through a learn experience, making it a better city for all, because we want to make sure that opportunities is available for all of us. We're all beautiful children of God, and there's no reason why we should have a condition in which our lives are being impacted negatively because of people's views and because of racism. So we want to transform that, and we want to bring everybody along with us so that we can have a better city, a better province, and certainly a better nation. So those are my remarks to begin. And what I'd like to do now is, I can't see everybody on my small screen. So I'm going to basically just call on the members that I can see and maybe just go around. Or Anthony, I don't know if you have a list of everyone. I'm sure you have a list, right? I'm just waiting for you to unmute.
Yes, Deputy Mayor, can I be heard? Okay.
You can be heard perfectly. So why don't I do this? I'll ask you to call the names of the members and then give the members an opportunity just to comment and just to tell us a little bit about themselves in about a minute or so. Would that be okay with you, Anthony?
That's perfect, sir. I can do that.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'll turn it over to you then. You can call out the names of the members and they can introduce themselves. We'll take about a minute each and we will move forward.
All right. So first, I'd like to start with Mr. Theophilus Adjei.
Yes, hello. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can. Good afternoon.
Yes. My apologies. I tried to get off work early and beat traffic and got stuck in traffic. So apologize for that.
Sorry, you're not driving, are you?
I'm not driving, no.
Okay, excellent. As long as you're not
driving me home.
Okay, great. That's fine. As long as you're not driving. This way you're safe.
Yes, to clarify that. Yes. Sorry. Okay, so yes, my name is Theophilus Adjei. I am of West African descent. Parents are from Ghana. I was actually born in Lagos, Nigeria, but raised here in Canada since I was 2 years old. So I consider myself Canadian in that sense because my parents are from Ghana, Canadian as well. I'm an addictions and concurrent disorders counselor with the Salvation Army's men's residential treatment program downtown Queen Jarvis. I've been in the field for about 5 years, just supporting male clients staying residents for about 12 weeks in our program, get back on track in their lives. And it's interesting that I don't see much Black male clients. It kind of tells me that either there's lack of information on how to access services like the services that I provide, or there's some stigmatization in the community. So I've done a lot of community advocacy work, working with youth, urban planning works as well. I'm just looking forward to very much excited to get to football.
Okay, thank you very much. I think you've cut out there, but thank you. Anthony, the next person, please.
The next person, I'd like, the next person, if I could ask Apefa Adjavan.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Apefa Adjavan. I am Manager of Research and Advocacy at Platform, so supporting Black, Indigenous, and racialized youth and civic engagement over there. I also have a programming background working with Women's Health and Women's Hands on the networking mentorship program for Black women in the city and with U of T Law and the Black Future Lawyers program. Outside of this, I work with the World Humanitarian Forum and the Canadian Commission for UNESCO on the International Decade for People of African Descent. So very excited to be here and to meet all of you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have Deborah Barnes.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Deborah Barnes. My background is social work and sociology. My research interest right now is equity, inclusion within the workplace, but I've done a lot of work in Toronto and the larger Southern Ontario area in the areas of social work. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Anthony, next.
Next, we'll have Justice Betty.
Good afternoon, everyone. So excited to be on this call and on this committee. My name is Justice, born and raised here in Toronto, and first got my start in politics at a young age, but was really inspired to get more involved after attending the presentation of the budget at Queen's Park when I was 9 years old and hearing about how the MPPs there were talking about real ways to impact the lives of Canadians in the ways that affect them the most, be it education and healthcare. And I thought, I really want to be a part of that. So since getting involved in that space, I've also developed a social entrepreneurship program for high school students around the world, now teaching well over 200 students in countries such as Jordan, Kenya, Turkey, as well as around the United States. I was previously a management consultant where the vast majority of my work focused on public sector organizations or public sector and social sector organizations, as well as diversity and inclusion work, and recently left the world of management consulting to develop the new social network for changemakers with my sister and a team of 30 young people from across North America. Really, really excited to be a youth voice on this committee and looking forward to what we will all accomplish together.
Anthony?
Thank you for that. Next, we will have Beverly Jean Daniel.
Anthony, it's Jonathan here. Beverly has sent regrets. She won't be able to attend the meeting this afternoon.
Okay, all right,
Okay.
Thank you. Next, please, Anthony.
Monique Hansen.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to be on this committee. Just a little bit about me. I am a newly appointed Toronto District School Board Vice Principal. I'm also a Black student that has grown up in the system, so very much so my background is education. I've grown up in the city, often a member and a resident of the Toronto Community Housing Corporation for many years. And I'm really excited to be here. Looking forward to a lot of collaboration and partnership with everyone here, and looking forward to elevating my leadership in a more meaningful way. And I'm so happy to be part of this committee.
Thank you very much. Anthony?
Next, we'll have Juanita Quirtang.
Hi, everyone. My name is Juanita. I'm currently a Diversity and Inclusion Program Manager for Publicis Group, which is a large advertising and communications holding company. I've always been very interested in politics, and I found that this was a great mechanism for me to get a better understanding of the policies and programs that the city is implementing around anti-Black racism, as well as to learn from so many of you talented individuals that are contributing in unique ways to our community. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from all of you and just learning and growing more. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Anthony?
Next, we will have Adam Lake.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adam Lake. I am a community activist and advocate, second generation Jamaican. I believe in community work where we are challenging the status quo and promoting social justice. And alongside being queer as well, I primarily do work that intersects race, sexuality, poverty, and other various factors that sort of hinders the Black community within Canada. I'm also an entrepreneur where I've started 2 organizations, both Breaking Barriers, that encourages education within correctional facilities and also enforces correctional officers to help inmates, which will allow us to decrease recidivism rates. And I've also founded Books Between Areas, which is more so a pen pal service. And through completing the Master of Global Affairs program at the Monk School of Global Affairs, University of Toronto, just recently, I have also created organizations throughout University of Toronto for Black students and etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony?
Yes. Next, we'll have Justine Namara.
Hello, can you hear me?
Justine? Are you
Yes,
there?
Justine,
Hi.
yeah, Justine here. Hi. Good afternoon, everybody. Justine Namara here. I am an international trade and development lawyer, currently the Associate Director at Skills for Change for Programs and Strategic Initiatives. In my role at Skills for Change, I oversee the Black community access and programming programs that we are rolling out, especially one that we are launching on Tuesday, which I invite you all to attend. It's the Black Leadership Institute on Social Action for Change. I'm very passionate about economic empowerment for Black communities, and to see how we can advance change through policy, through legal avenues, but also through advocacy to make a difference in the Black communities' lives. Before coming to Canada, I used to work with the World Trade Organization based in Switzerland, in Geneva, working to build least developed countries' capacity to trade internationally. So I hope that I can be of great value to the committee, and I really look forward to working with each and every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anthony?
Thank you for that. Next, we will have Karis Newton-Thompson.
Hello, everyone. I'm Karis Newton-Thompson. I am really excited to be here. I'm glad to see Toronto going forward on this countering anti-Black racism agenda. And I'm looking forward to our recommendations taking feet and actual actions taking place. I am retired.
I think you've just muted yourself, Ms. Thompson. Yeah.
I don't know how that happened, but
it's okay.
I'll keep my hands close to just away from the computer. I have been an educator for over 30 years, and on a parallel vein, I've also been active in the Black community for that amount of time, agitating for the education of Black children, Black youth, and
You've muted yourself again.
I didn't touch it. I don't know what happened. I'm going to move away from the computer now. Okay, so I don't know how far you got with me. I am currently volunteering in community organizations. I see the computer is doing something, so I think it's probably a network problem, not me.
No problem.
Because I didn't touch anything.
We can hear you.
So I'm looking forward to working with everyone. I'm really excited with the roster of people. I'm really thrilled.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Anthony, next.
Thank you. Next, we'll have M.N. Phillips.
There. That's how I unmute. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Ann Phillips, and I'm originally a Jamaican Canadian. I've been in Canada for quite a while, so I have lived in Toronto a lot of that time. I have a very, I would say, eclectic background. I'm originally a molecular geneticist by trade, but I also have a PhD in environmental studies. So I have, I guess, functioned a lot in the education realm, higher education, and also a lot in the area of health and healthcare and health services. And right now, I am the manager of community health and chronic disease at South Riverdale Community Health Center. So I bring I've been on the chair of the board of Women's Health and Women's Hands, and I've done a lot of different work with health specific organizations, and really focus at the intersections of race, class, and gender in a lot of the work that I do. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to address anti-Black racism and to learn and to contribute with everyone here. Thank you.
Anthony?
Thank you. Next, we'll have Halima Hashi.
Hey everybody, I'm also very honored and excited to be here. My name is Halima Hashi. I'm a Somali Canadian, born in Somalia, raised in Ottawa, living in Toronto. I think like many people here, I wear different hats. I'm a forensic social worker with the Scarborough Health Network, working with individuals with major mental illness and criminal justice involvement. I'm also a mental health therapist at the Canadian Centre for Immigrant and Refugee Healthcare, which is an amazing organization that provides health services to undocumented individuals and newcomers. I'm also a contract faculty member at York University. I teach international social work and immigrant, refugee, and diaspora studies. And I do a lot of consulting work with community organizations. Right now I'm working with Autism Ontario around capacity building for caregivers with a specific focus on Black caregivers. So I'm very honored to be here and excited.
Thank you. Anthony, next.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Molly-Ann Weir.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So
good afternoon.
I guess I'm all over the place as it relates to different fields, primarily at the provincial level, from youth sector, justice sector, to Indigenous affairs, to housing, and I'm currently an associate at the Ontario Growth Secretariat at the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, essentially looking at land use planning as relates to population growth, employment growth, and how it intersects. And I think it will be very helpful, at least being on this panel, to create some collaboration with at the city level and the provincial level, especially as it had to deal with affordable housing. So I'm on here and hoping to make some change, not only for myself, but our youths coming up.
Thank you. Anthony?
Thank you.
We have one more.
Thank you. Last but not least, we have Maya Yaya.
Thank you, Anthony.
Yes. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. Yeah, so I am a University of Toronto student in my last year. I'm majoring in sociology and political science. So excited to graduate. Besides school, I wear many hats. So I've done a lot of research in anti-racism and needs assessment research for specifically Black youth. But I've also recently started a new position at SEE, which is basically an organization that promotes socioeconomic stability in the Black community, again, kind of more centering Black youth. That's a little bit about my experience. And again, I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all who have introduce themselves and are out here. Anthony, I think it'd be good right now if we could introduce the staff team that are here as well. And maybe just a quick introduction, maybe 30 seconds or less for each, or maybe you will just, go through the names, because I know staff are going to make some presentations and they'll have an opportunity to present themselves at that point. But if we can just do a quick flow through with respect to staff, that'd be very helpful.
Sure. So I will start with myself quickly. My name is Anthony Morgan, and I am the manager of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit. And so I have the incredible honor and privilege to support the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit team members. We're an active team of 8 folks who are working in diverse ways to support the advancement and implementation of the Toronto Action Plan to confront anti-Black racism. The whole team is not presently with us, but there are a few members who are on this call, one of which is Milana Roberts. And so I turn it over to her as one of our policy development officers.
Thank you, Anthony. I'll keep it brief. As you heard, my name is Milana Roberts. I'm a policy development officer in the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit, and I'll be supporting the committee to provide strategic advice around policy issues at the intergovernmental level, as well as assisting developing the agenda with committee clerk staff. I look forward to supporting committee members and welcome you all for this momentous first meeting. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Mesrat.
Thank you, Milana. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mesrat Azneki, and I am a community development officer who has recently joined the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit. I will be supporting this committee with engagement activities, so community engagement activities, as well as supporting with the development of agenda items. So very excited to see you all again and looking forward to continuing this work together. So I will hand it over to, maybe Denise Campbell to introduce herself. I don't think anyone else from our unit is on the call, so over to Denise.
Thanks, Mesrat. Hello, everyone. My name is Denise Andrea Campbell. I'm the Executive Director of Social Development, Finance, and Administration, the division that houses the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit. And you will be hearing from myself and my colleague, Ainania Ayodele Grant, in a moment. Before I throw it over to Ainania, I just want to really thank Anthony, Milana, and Mesrat for their incredible work, both in processing and helping to select all of you and preparing us for this inaugural meeting. Ainania?
Thank you so much, Denise. Greetings, everyone. As Denise said, I'm Ainania Ayodele Grant, and this is a profound moment. And so I just want to take just 1 second to say this is a profound moment to have you all here and to see the brilliance, of course, of the Black community, just in case anybody ever forgets. I was the first, I established the Anti-Black Racism Unit and worked with Denise as a consultant at the time to bring this report to council. So this is tremendously a proud moment for us. And currently, I am the Director of Community Resources in Social Development, Finance, and Administration. And I'd leave it there. We'll talk some more when I do my presentation with Denise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anthony, is there anyone else? I think that's it for now, right? Am I correct?
That is it, sir.
Okay, great. All right, just before we move on to the item with respect to appointment overview and expectation of public members, I just want to pause for a moment just to get people thinking about the following. This committee has been tasked by council to meet 4 times per year to discuss a variety of issues relating to confronting anti-Black racism. However, as we've heard from the members of the committee in your introductions, the wealth and the level of talent that's here on your daily work that you're doing, we would do ourselves a disservice if we simply focus our attention on meeting, just 4 times a year. I am going to suggest, and we'll work this through, and of course, we work this through with the vice chair when that person is named, and staff, that we need to think about how we work in between those periods when we don't meet, because I think there's a lot of work to be done by this vastly talented group of people. I've suggested to Mr. Morgan that we set up a Slack channel. I use that in a variety of different areas in terms of some of the committees that I chair in the city, to allow people to be able to be engaged on an ongoing basis, to talk about the subject matters, to talk about particular issues amongst ourselves through this mechanism. Materials that the staff will want you to take a look at, materials that you may want others to take a look at, could be uploaded as part of the Slack channel process. And if you don't know what it is right now, don't worry about that, because we would obviously provide you with information that helps you to understand. But from listening to the introduction and reading the bios of folks, I know that this is an amazing team, probably the best that we've been able to assemble to deal with this particular issue in the entire history of the City of Toronto. So we continue to make history, and we have to live up to that expectation in terms of getting things done. So I just want you to keep that in mind for the moment, and we'll talk a little bit further about that as we move forward. And if we don't get to it today, we will get something out to you in the coming days to talk about how we can create those ongoing dialogues. Part of the expectation with respect to this body is that we'll have subcommittees and so on, and that's great. But I think that there's going to be an ongoing need for us to talk and share and develop and to bring forward ideas that is going to be very dynamic, because I don't want this to be a static type of committee where you just meet, talk, and then that's it. We go sort of silent. I don't think that's really what we are really designed to do. So with that being said, we have a lot of grounds to cover, lots of things to go over, lots of information to give you so that you develop a broader understanding in terms of the integration, how things work within the context of council, a committee that has been struck by council, which this is what this advisory committee is. So without further ado, I'm going to then ask the staff to present CR 1.2, which is the appointment overview and the expectation of members of this committee. So,
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Jonathan. Yes,
it's Jonathan here. A motion has to be moved to receive the item.
To receive, yes, yes.
Number one.
But Jonathan, I'm going to get to that, and so we'll do that now, right? Can you hear me? Okay. We'll do that.
Yes,
so on CR 1.1, basically, I'm going to move that the information that's been presented to us be received. So that's the motion. So all those in favor, you can raise your hands, and I think the clerk can see. Jonathan, you probably have a bigger screen than I do, and I'll flip to make sure that we see everybody. So if you can all raise your hands if you're in favor of receiving the information that we have. The fact of the matter, ladies and gentlemen, that's the only thing we can do with it. So we're all receiving it because it's information. All those in favor, opposed, that carries. Thank you. Jonathan, are we good?
You're good, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So moving on to CR 1.2, appointment overview and expectations of public members. And members, there's a lot of information to absorb, but just take your time. It will all come together. So there's a presentation by staff.
Yes, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Thompson. I think Jonathan is going to display the slides for me.
All right, we can see.
Can you hear me okay?
You just introduce yourself, Robin. Go ahead. Thank you.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robin Cook. I'm the acting manager of the public appointments team in the city clerk's office. And I just wanted to start off by saying thank you very much for allowing me to present at this first meeting of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee. I'm personally really looking forward to following along with your meetings and learning from your discussions. And today I'll be providing an overview of your appointment and sharing just some information about expectations of public members. So if we could go to the first slide, please, Jonathan. Okay, so your terms of appointment. So you've been appointed for a term that ends on November 14th, 2022, or until the mandate is completed. And you've been appointed at pleasure of council. So this means that City Council could rescind your appointment at any time for any reason. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So throughout your term of appointment, you must continue to meet the eligibility criteria. So you must continue to be a resident of the City of Toronto, not an employee of the City of Toronto or any of its agencies, and not a spouse, partner, child, or parent of a member of City Council. And so just a quick overview of the composition of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee. So there's 15 members. And there's one member of City Council, of course, that's Deputy Mayor Thompson. And then we have 8 representatives of organizations that work in fields such as, but not limited to, housing, healthcare, education, employment and entrepreneurship, child welfare, policing, and the criminal justice system. There are 3 elder members who self-identify and represent the wisdom of Black communities, and 3 youth members between the ages of 18 to 29. And so the committee will meet approximately 4 times per year at the call of the chair, and the duration of the meetings will be approximately 2 to 3 hours, and the meetings are open to the public and will be held on weekdays during business hours. And regular attendance at the meetings is expected, and we hope that members come to the meetings prepared to discuss the items on the agenda. If you are unable to attend a meeting for any reason, we just ask that you contact the committee secretary to let them know in advance. And so public members of the committee receive an honorarium of $125 per meeting. And the honorarium is not intended for members who serve as representatives of organizations or businesses where they are employed. So we'll ask that public members, you can self-identify if you would like to receive the honorarium. We are still working out some of the details, but staff will be in touch with you to provide any necessary paperwork. And one thing that I did just want to mention is that the city is required by the CRA, if you receive more than $500 of honorarium for from the city, you will be given a T4A tax slip. So we just wanted to mention that, and if you do reach the threshold of that $500, then we'll reach out to you just for some additional information, including your SIN number, but we won't reach out for that unless you reach the $500 threshold. And all reasonable expenses incurred while doing authorized committee business will be reimbursed, and any expenses for business activities should be authorized by the committee. So there's a couple of reasons that we would just like you to notify the city clerk and the chairs in writing. The first would be if your contact information changes or if your eligibility changes, and if you're requesting a leave of absence, or if you do have to resign, we just ask you notify us in writing with your effective resignation date. We'll go to the next slide. Thanks, Jonathan. So in terms of the leave of absence, you can request to take a leave of absence for any reason. Depending on the duration of the leave, City Council may choose to fill the vacancy on a temporary basis. If you run or seek appointment to any elected office, then a leave of absence is required, and the leave must begin on or before the date of application or nomination to the elected office. And if your eligibility changes, then unfortunately you would be required to resign from the committee. And it does feel a little bit strange to talk about resignations at the first meeting, but if you do have to resign for any reason, we just ask that you notify the Public Appointments Office and the chairs in writing with the effective resignation date. And now I'll just quickly talk about some expectations of public appointees to the city. So the first is to serve the public well by striving to have a solid understanding of the committee's overall goals and missions, working collaboratively towards a shared purpose, and communicating with the public in a respectful, open, fair, and constructive manner. The second is to champion the standards of public service by upholding the highest standards of conduct and displaying the principles of integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, accountability, honesty, and leadership. The third is to foster equity, diversity, and inclusion by championing the city's commitment to a discrimination-free environment and valuing diverse perspectives and contributions. And the fourth is to act with integrity and impartiality by conducting your duties in an objective and uninfluenced manner and placing the public good before self-interest. So this concludes my presentation. If you have any questions about your appointment at any time, you can always contact our office, and we can be reached by email at appoint@toronto.ca or by phone at 416-397-0088, and you can also visit our website, which is toronto.ca/serveyourcity. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, Robin. And we are now open for questions from members of the committee. Any clarification, any points that has been raised by Robin that you need to have some further clarification on? This is your opportunity. As I said, I can't see everyone at a single glance. I'm flipping around on the screen. So if you have any questions, if you could just unmute yourself and let me know who is speaking, and then we could forward the questions to staff. Okay, I'm giving another 30 seconds or so. I want to remind people not to be shy. If you have any questions, just let's ask the questions. But Robin has done such an amazing job. So it's clear to me then that because she has been so fantastic and has done such a great job, you have no questions. So Robin, thank you so much, and really appreciate you participating, and looking forward to ensuring that you hear more from this amazing group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor.
You're welcome. Thank you. And you're going to stay with us, right? Are you staying with us or are you leaving? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, moving to the next item, which is CR1. Oh, sorry. I'm going to ask that this item be received for information. So all those in favor of receiving the item?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, it's Jonathan. Before moving a motion, members will have the opportunity to speak to the matter.
Yeah, that's right. But is there anyone wishing to speak to the item? You have no questions? You have anything to say about this? Yeah, I didn't think so. Okay, no, so Jonathan, it appears that no one is interested in speaking. I will just simply say then that, again, thank you to Robin for this. This presentation is obviously helpful to guide you and to give you a better understanding in terms of what the expectations are of members of this advisory committee, and the expectation is from City Council and the public at large, who in fact obviously are the citizens of Toronto, who on behalf of Council, we established this advisory group. And so if there's nothing further, I will then just simply say that we just vote to receive the matter, and thank Robin again for the presentation. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you. So you have voted on your second items, members, so this will get better, I'm sure. All right, so moving right along, we are going to move to CR 1.3. The City Governance Overview and Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee. So we have a presentation, and so Denise, is this you and team?
This one's me, Deputy Mayor from the City Manager's Office.
Oh, right. Okay. Hi. How are you? Good to see you. Okay.
Good to see you too. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shanali Chakraborty, and I work in Governance and Corporate Strategy in the City Manager's Office. going to share my presentation with you. So I'll be going over essentially how kind of an overview of how our government works to give you some context of the role of the committee vis-a-vis the larger structure. So this diagram sort of depicts the essential pieces of our government. So our governing body is City Council, and the committee is set up to give advice directly to City Council. Working to support City Council is the city's administration, or what we call the Toronto Public Service. And you've been introduced to members of one of the city's divisions, Social Development and Finance Administration, where the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit resides. So that's within this entity, and staff work to provide advice to council as well as implement council's decisions. So when we refer to staff, we mean members of the public service. Aside from that, the city also has agencies and corporations, and you would be familiar with many of these. For example, the TTC, Toronto Transit Commission, is one of the city's agencies. So it's not a direct part of the public service. It's a separate entity, but it's created by the city that is delivering public services as part of the city. And then city corporations are also created in much the same manner that a for-profit or nonprofit corporation would be created. In this case, a municipal corporation. An example would be Toronto Community Housing Corporation that you would be familiar with. So, these are entities and structures that, you sort of see and interact with and hear about. I'll just kind of go over how these all fit within the governance structure. And then our accountability officers are important, independent oversight mechanisms that advance transparency and openness. I'll speak a little bit about that. So to start with City Council, so our governing body. So council as a whole is able to make decisions on behalf of our city government. And in some instances, council delegates that authority, so gives that authority to other entities to take certain kinds of decisions. Agencies and corporations are actually an example of that. Council has said, I'll create this entity and then allow you to take decisions and operate transit, for example. In other cases, City Council is able to, through the City of Toronto Act, which is the provincial statute that gives the city its powers to as a government. And so council is able to create certain kinds of committees. And at the current time, with the current size of council, we have 4 what we call standing committees. And they essentially contemplate the policy items that eventually make their way to council for decision making. And they're organized by particular topics. So we have a committee that focuses on economic and community development. Deputy Mayor Thompson chairs this committee. We also have a committee focused on infrastructure and environment, one on planning and housing, so also development and housing related matters, and then one on what we call general government and licensing. And there's a fair amount of licensing work that the city does. So generally the items that come to City Council for decisions, they start at standing committee where there's a deeper look, and standing committees are composed of a subset of members of City Council. So they're all made up of City Council members dispersed amongst these committees. There's also an executive committee that makes some key strategic and policy decisions. The chairs of each of the standing committees sit on the executive committee, and it's chaired by the mayor. And often when there's certain kinds of complex issues, those are considered by executive. And included in that is the city's annual budget. So there is a committee that dives deep and considers the budget, and then it comes to executive committee, and then it comes to council for final decision making. Generally speaking, there isn't sort of final decisions made at the committee level. That's done at the council level. But there are community councils, or a special type of committee that's specific to Toronto that takes into account how large our city is and the history of our city, that hadn't been amalgamated until the late 1990s. So prior to that, there was separate municipalities that were Scarborough and Etobicoke, granted under the banner of Metro Toronto. And so these community councils are able to consider geographically specific certain kinds of issues. And council has, through the powers of the City of Toronto Act, been able to delegate that community councils make some final. It's kind of important to know where certain matters flow through in the council decision-making process, and also the role of council advisory bodies, of which the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee is one. So when advice is going to flow through from you to City Council, that advice can flow through the standing committees, depending on the topic that you might be giving advice on, or through executive committee, particularly when there's sort of strategic, cross-cutting, large or systemic issues, or have an intergovernmental context that would be considered through the executive committee on its route to the. This is just a geographic sense of those community councils. And, many of you, as you've mentioned for a long time, residents of Toronto would be well familiar that, the Scarborough Community Council is largely along the same borders that the City of Scarborough had been, whereas the other ones are not necessarily the exact borders, but they, generally speaking, follow those geographies. So in terms of a little bit more about that decision-making process that and the flow that occurs. So as mentioned, when items come through community councils and standing committees, they can come from a variety of sources. So routinely, city staff, so members of the public service who work in various subject areas, do provide reports through community councils and standing committees, depending on their mandates and purviews. But proposals also come directly from members of council themselves that may sit on the committee or don't sit on the committee, but can provide a submission. Some reports come from the city's agencies and corporations, but they're also governed by boards that are constituted by City Council. And then reports come from council advisory bodies with advice, and that would be the route that we're considering, like that is considered for your committee. So you can have, whether it's a report or a letter or submissions that you would make, providing your advice to council would go through that process I had mentioned, go through standing committee. And then the committees can enhance or make amendments to the recommendations that have been made by whoever is making the original submission. So the committee will often, add to or change what staff have recommended before it goes to City Council. And then that's where the decision will be made. And depending on what the decision is, there's further work to do in terms of implementation and so on. And staff will undertake that. And this is just, in terms of how the legal governance framework works, is the way that council's decisions are enacted is through confirming bylaw. There is a cyclical process where items could be referred back if the committee or council wishes more information or additional work. They may also provide direction back to staff or back to potentially an agency. So that's what this area refers to. As well, there are various points at which engagement and consultation take place. Staff engage, and you may be well aware of this. When there's large scale public consultations or particularly targeted consultations, those are, happening by staff or often by agencies and corporations as well. And members of council do their engagement as well. And then committees, standing committees and community councils receive deputations directly from staff. And you would see this on the same YouTube streams and video archive of past committee meetings in terms of the public's input into that process. Written submissions are also welcome, and the input of the public is encouraged by a number of. So now to speak a little bit about the committee itself. So just to take a step back from this committee in general, council can establish these bodies within a council term, and as it has been mentioned, the body wraps up its work at the end of the council term. There are bodies that are then reestablished in the next council term, but we have examples of that. The committee itself may be consulting with the public or institutions or sectors to provide its advice to council. The committee itself does not deliver services or direct the staff of the city, the public service, or make binding decisions. They provide advice. So that's an important note to its role. The composition, as you know, can include members of council. We'll have at least 50% public members. And then similar to these bodies, there are other types of advisory bodies of the city that do directly advise staff. And so, for example, there is a partnership and accountability circle that provides advice to staff on the CABR action plan. So that's a staff-initiated body for advice, whereas this is a council-created body to provide advice directly to council, and it's an important distinction. There's a list of some other council advisory bodies that exist right now. An Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Body, Film and Television, and others listed here. So there's not a long list, whereas for program advisory bodies, those that are advising staff, we could have at times upward of 100. So as you know, and I've just restated it here, from the terms of reference that was adopted by council to create this committee, the mandate of the CABR Advisory Committee is to provide advice to City Council on these particular measures to support the implementation of the principles of the International Decade of People of African Descent, to address recognition, development, and justice, and as well on the elimination of barriers faced by Black communities, and recommend how city engagement can help improve access to federal, provincial, federal, and community agency services and programs, to ensure the interests and needs of Black communities are reflected in city programs and service delivery, and on emerging issues and trends of significance to Black communities as they relate to city services and programs. You will be, I'm sure, going deeper into how the committee will do its work with respect to this mandate, but this is stating the framework for what council has adopted, that is the purpose of this. So in terms of governance, some of this is, a kind of a summary of what I've been mentioning along the way. So the committee will provide advice to council through the executive committee or another appropriate city committee, depending on the topic that you may be providing advice on. You'll be operating in accordance with council's simplified procedures for advisory bodies, and I think there's an item on the agenda to go over that. All meetings will be open to the public and comply with the open meeting requirements of the City of Toronto Act, that provincial statute that gives our powers, that requires these meetings to be open, and meaning accessible to the public. And then there will be up to 4 meetings a year. And as you know, staff from Social Development and Finance Administration will be providing policy and strategic support and advice. And the City Clerk's office, who, has been, as you've already been experiencing through this meeting, provide the meeting management support. So this is also enshrined in your terms of reference. So some of the key contacts are listed here, both for meeting management and for policy support. So that's the main focus that I wanted to cover, up front. But I do want to give you a little bit more additional information about the city's government, because as you go through your experience of this committee, I hope that this will provide for a reference for you to come back to if you have questions about other aspects of Toronto's governmental structure. So I focused on City Council and the role of the committee to provide advice there. I'll just touch on some of these other elements quickly now. So to begin with, in terms of the public administration, This is an org chart that's found on the city's website, and it just gives you a sense that the city administration is organized by divisions and also by what we call service area. And over time, you may become more familiar with it. The head of the public service is the city manager, and the city manager has areas, which is where I work in terms of these governmental structures. And then, but more from the perspective of what's experienced by the public, there is an area called community and social services, and that's where social development, finance, and administration resides, but also things like parks, forestry, and recreation, public health, things that you're seeing and experiencing on a day-to-day basis, particularly now, but ongoing, most of our communities. There's also economic development and culture, children's services that oversees childcare. So they're clustered in the service area, so to enhance collaboration and an intersection between areas. There's also another service area that's focused on things like transportation, roads, transit, bike lanes, all of those things. Solid waste management and waste collection, engineering and construction, as well as transit, buildings, just to kind of remind you about all of the areas of municipal purview and how you can kind of see them through our org chart and just get a sense of that. And then we have a couple of other areas that are really about helping the city run as a government, basically what we call internal services, but also where, tax collection and all of that. One thing I just want to touch on in terms of something related to the city's, what's led by the public service is the city's recently renewed intergovernmental strategy, given the context of this committee. So this was presented to council in early April of this year, and really to advance, in particular, our recovery from the pandemic and how I've shared here with you the vision and principles of that intergovernmental strategy, which is to be collaborative, working with the whole of government approach, collaborative with our external partners, stakeholders, and the community, regionally sensitive, working very closely with our regional neighbors in terms of within the GTA and Hamilton, and that when we engage intergovernmentally, that we're speaking with some alignment across our council and our public service, focused on outcomes, again, collaborative, and transparent, and through mutual respect, just highlighting some of these. And so I have linked here the strategy, and I think it would be, these are some resources that you may come back to and want to go into more deeply, depending on the work of the committee as it goes. And then just a few more on agencies and corporations. Some of the reasons that we have agencies and corporations is to focus on particular policy objectives or operate in a commercial environment, or, sometimes have some decision making where the governing authority has some other experts on it beyond members of council. So those are some reasons. There's a link with more information. I've just included here a list of some of our agencies, and just to highlight for you on the left, so the Board of Health that you often hear about, that's where there's significant reports right now in terms of the pandemic. The Toronto Transit Commission I've already mentioned. Police services, public library. So our agencies are, really a significant part of the municipality's work, including its budget, when you consider the budget of the TTC or the budget of the police or the library. We've got community-based entities. It's a longer list, but they're actually quite small in terms of their overall size. And then corporations, aside from Toronto Community Housing that I mentioned, Toronto Hydro Corporation is a really significant entity size as well. And we have other tribunals that are for oversight for, in some cases, they're appeal mechanisms for certain planning matters. In some cases, they're where people go when they need to have an adjustment to a bylaw around a development project, etc. So, these are things with a lot of public interface that might be of interest to you. And finally, the oversight mechanisms that we have that are actually a key part of, sort of our ethical, open, transparent framework for our government. So we have 4 accountability officers, and dating back to our first was instituted in 2002, the Auditor General, leading up to our Ombudsman in 2008. So it's been quite some time, and the model of accountability has evolved. I'll just speak a little bit to them. The purpose of them is to provide objective and independent oversight to our government. So our officers are not part of the public service. They're not part of our elected body, but they're independent experts appointed by council to do for some specific mandates. And they are required by law. So they are required under the City of Toronto Act, the Ombudsman, Integrity Commissioner, and Auditor General, and we are required to have a lobbyist registry. And we do have a policy framework within the municipal code around independence. So the Auditor General is really focused on value for money and does reviews and reports around whether the city's decisions and operations, etc., are providing value for money. The Integrity Commissioner oversees the code of conduct for members of council as well as members of agency and corporation boards. And then the lobbyist registrar oversees the registry where all lobbyists must disclose for openness and transparency on lobbying behavior. And then the ombudsman takes complaints from the public on whether the city is treating the public fairly and does systemic investigations. So not individual ones, but if they get repeated complaints on similar matters, they will do systemic investigation. Important function. So I will conclude there. My contact information is provided, and I'm happy to take questions now or in the future if questions.
Thank you very much, Nellie. That was very thorough. So, members, I hope you have questions for Sonali. So the portal's opened, and as I said, I'm flipping through to see if there is any hands. So if you have questions, please. Junita?
Yeah. Will we be able to? Will we be getting this presentation? It was really thorough and you did a great job. I had no idea that there was so much. So that was really educational. I would love to review that again. Is it possible to get a copy of that?
Sure.
Yeah, I think Jonathan can also let you know that on the agenda with the publicly available link, with this item, the agenda is, the presentation is linked.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's great. So if you scroll down to the bottom, you click that, it will open it up and you have access to that information.
Okay, yes. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, more questions? I just want to remind you folks not to be shy. We have the expert staff members who are here. If you have questions, this is your opportunity to ask some questions. I'm just still flipping around the screen here. I see everyone still muted. So again, just a reminder, if you have questions, please, I invite you to, I heard a voice.
Oh, it's Juanita again. I have a question.
Oh, yes. Okay, go ahead, please.
So I just wanted to make sure I understood the process. So basically any recommendations that we make here would then be filtered through one of those 4 committees that were mentioned based on what element or what area the recommendation is for. Did I understand you correctly?
Yeah, correct. Yes, 4 plus 1, which is executive. So executive committee, which is sort of cross-cutting, strategic, intergovernmental. But if it's specific to, say, housing or community development, you can go through the specific.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else with questions? I'm just going to flip and see whether I can see anyone else. Okay, so I gather everyone understood that and no questions.
I have a question. I know that we're an advisory body. Sorry. So are we governed under the Integrity Commissioner, or like in terms of the code of conduct?
No, so that's a great question. You're not. So the members of council, as part of city council, and members of boards who govern the agencies and corporations, who have, significant, like they actually have decision-making authority, and they oversee, the budget operations, for example, of TTC or police. They're all governed under codes of conduct. But as an advisory committee, you're not. But I think those kinds of principles that Robin laid out are encouraged, right? Acting with integrity and objectivity, etc. But there isn't a code.
Okay, thank you very much for the question, and thanks for the response. Okay, this is an important section, so I just want to encourage you, if there were anything that you need clarification on this section, I would really invite you to ask the question or to speak up. It's really super important that that you ask any questions of staff that's actually here with us now. Maya, I see you're green there, so great. Go ahead.
Yes, I do have a very quick question.
Sure.
Just kind of building off of Juanita's question, just in terms of the filtering of recommendations that we might have, is there a specific set timeline that might take, or a certain amount of time that it might take?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I didn't include that detail here, but I do in some longer presentations. But council meets on a cycle that's roughly longer than a month. But and it's not 12 cycles. I think there may be 8. Clerks could clarify. But if you look through the calendar, you'll see the cycle. And so since the committee's meeting 4 times a year, you would start to project ahead if you think you're going to have advice. And staff would help you with this. And they would say, well, I think we can give advice into this cycle of council. Our committees meet the first couple of weeks of the cycle, and then the council meeting is like the 4th week of that same cycle. So in terms of time frame, it's really just projecting based on when you're meeting and you're reaching a conclusion around your advice, what timing that will lead to into a given council cycle. And then reports do have to be into the clerk 2 weeks prior to a given meeting, and so that the agenda can then be available to the public a week ahead of the meeting. So these are some things that clerks in the CBR unit staff will be supporting you with in terms of understanding the timing, but just to give you a sense of it.
Okay, thanks so much. Okay, any further questions? Just looking through. Oh, go ahead, please, Juanita.
Juanita has a question.
Okay.
Yes, so do I.
I just provide some insight on what exactly the best format for the recommendations to look like. Is it just like a proposal format? Are there specific details that we need to think about? What is the most effective way for the recommendations to be formatted, or the end result, if you will?
Yeah. I do think staff will help you with this along the way, depending, as will Deputy Mayor Thompson will provide you advice as well. Depending on the matter, like, do you want to provide something longer? Is there some research that you've overseen with staff and you want to provide a report, or in another way? There are certain templates that clerks will need. It might be you have the template plus another document. So they will provide, on a case-by-case basis, I think they'll provide you with that support.
Yeah, if I could just add, Juanita, so the motions are basically requesting actions, right? So whether or not it's requesting staff to look at a specific series of information or bodies of work, and to come back with a report that really speaks to the specific subject matter that you've outlined or any other members will outline. But as Sonalia just indicated, we can help you to prepare that the motion so it comes through committee, and then it's a request of staff to do certain things, and that information would come back to you at a later date. This is why I said earlier on that I think it would be important for us to establish a Slack channel so members can speak about issues or things come up. You've got an aha moment and you want to have the input of other advisory committee members so that they could speak to it, and you can formulate sort of a motion around or a series of motion asking staff to do certain things, and that will come through by way of the committee and so on. And so these are some of the things that we could we'll finalize going forward. But I think it's really important just that everybody understands, in order to trigger certain things, to have certain actions, it comes by way of a motion as part of the official record and so on. So it's extremely important for that sense. Anne, you're next.
Yeah, my question is kind of along the same lines. So if our role is to make recommendations to the four bodies and the executive, do any of the bodies and or the executive ever seek our advice on specific issues? So do the requests come in the other direction, and a request is made of us to provide some thought, advice, recommendations on specific issues, or is it just us making recommendations?
I'm going to answer one way, and I'm sure Deputy Mayor Thompson will have more to add. So I think that sometimes at committee, a member will say, staff, we would like X from you, and we would like you to consult with X committee, like such as your committee. And so staff will be directed to consult with you. So that's one channel by which that would happen. And another is, as staff learn that this committee is now instituted and operating, they will seek opportunities prior to them giving advice to committee to come to you. And I'm sure Denise and team will be a part of encouraging that throughout the public service to say, you know, like, we can put you on the agenda, we support it, etc. She can speak more to that. But
thank you. And just to add to that, at times at council and or at committee, there are matters that comes before the committee, and committee members may refer the matter, for example, to the Confronting Anti-Racism Advisory Committee for consideration. And that's an opportunity for you to sort of respond back to the body, whether or not it's a particular committee of council or council itself, on matters that are extremely important. Let me also say too, though, that the strength of this advisory body and committee, it's extremely important to recognize that you all have an opportunity to certainly shape the direction and certainly the policy directive that council will eventually make based on a variety of different things that they consider on matters that affects the Black community. But here's the thing. You all have an opportunity as well to look at council agendas, to look at committee agendas, to see the subject matters that are on those agendas. And then you have an opportunity to speak to those matters using the lens that you have, whether or not it's more narrowly focused or much broader in terms of its requirement or amplification. So these are additional ways. So imagine going to a committee and saying, you know, I'm a member of the Confronting Anti-Racism Advisory Committee. That has a weight, right, in terms of recognition. So you can speak to the issue. And so there's great opportunities. So it's a two-way street. It flows back and forth with respect to how this works. And that's why I want everyone to leave today's meeting with a strong understanding of the important role that you will play in directing and as well in requesting that direction actions be taken, and through your direction and through your requests of council or bodies of council in order to constructively do things that addresses the issues that we are dealing with which is confronting anti-Black racism. So there are policies that happens whether or not it's a Board of Health. There are policies that happens whether or not it's in our housing sector, transportation sector, and so on. So I would say the girth of opportunity is quite enormous now that you're here, right? It was big before, but it's even bigger now, and you now have an element, which I'll use the term, a cachet to act, then to ensure that your request on your action is going to be responded to in a direct manner, because you now have a pipeline into the council, into the committees of council, and so on. So what you're doing here today is not simply window dressing. You now have an opportunity to change the narrative of the discussion and decisions that are made at council in a broad way. All right. Anything further? Any other? Anne, did you have something? Oh, sorry. I saw your light just came on. It was green. I'm just going to flip, because I really do want to make sure that if there are any additional questions or any comments that anyone has on this particular issue, we can deal with them now. Okay, so I see no further question. I wondered whether or not anyone wishes to speak on this particular item. And I'm just flipping my screen, so bear with me here. Okay, so no one wishes to speak on this item because it's been thoroughly presented. And Sonali, thank you so much. It was fantastic. I just simply want then to say, as the chair, to thank you for this presentation. As I said, it's very thorough. And sorry,
I was just saying that I thought the presentation was excellent.
So do you wish to speak then? Please go ahead.
So I just wanted to say I thought you did a great job of making something very complex very simple to understand. So fantastic. You did a great job.
Thank you, Anita. So then can I ask you then to move the item? How about that? I'll ask you just to move the item. This will be a new experience for you. So we're moving the item. Yeah. We'll move it to a vote. You'll move the item, right? So I will then take it to a vote. So you'll say, okay. I'll move the item, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'll move the item.
Okay, thank you. And members, the item have been moved. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much, Juanita. You have moved your first item. Thank you. All right, so we're moving on now to the next item. It's CR 1.4, Meeting Process and Simplified Rules of Procedure. Sylvia, I believe you are here.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, thank you very much, Chair. My name is Sylvia Przezdzecki. I'm an administrator with the City Clerk's office. So together with Jonathan and other colleagues, we are at the other end of the KBRAC email address, and we are part of the team that supports your meetings and can also be your first point of contact when it comes to the work of the committee. So let me just display, actually, may I ask my colleague Manesh to please pass back the power to display a presentation? Thank you. Okay, so I hope you can all see that. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the rules of engagement for these committees. And like many other meetings that you might attend, the meetings of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee are structured according to a set of rules. Council advisory bodies, such as this one, use the simplified rules of procedure, and simplified simply means that they are a pared down version of City Council's rules of procedure, based on the same principles as those rules, simply tailored to the needs of an advisory committee. The principles that form the basis of the simplified rules are, as well as City Council's rules, are the members' rights listed on this slide. It is expected that members of an advisory committee, such as yours, come to the table with different viewpoints, and these principles safeguard the rights of all members to participate equally in the meeting. Another principle, and this one that is enshrined in law, is that all the decision-making takes place in public. So the public may attend any meeting, whether it's held in person or virtually, and members of the public may submit written comments or present to the committee on any item on the agenda. Advance notice of the meeting and all agenda items must be given, and it's the agenda itself, which is published 5 days before the meeting, that provides this notice. All consideration and debate of agenda items takes place at the meeting. And meetings are held, as Robin mentioned, in a public location during regular business hours. All meetings must begin and end in public, but that doesn't mean they must always be public from beginning to end. There are about a dozen circumstances set out in the City of Toronto Act that would make it appropriate for a committee to close its meeting. And I've listed a couple here. For instance, if the committee were to be discussing personal matters about an identifiable individual, that would be an appropriate reason to close the meeting. The simplified rules set out the role of the chair and the co-chair. Essentially, the chair, or in the chair's absence, the co-chair, assures the progression of business by ensuring that agenda items are fully considered and decided upon, and that order and decorum is maintained. And the co-chair of your committee will be elected as the next item of business. All public members are eligible to fill that role. The simplified rules set out the responsibilities of members during a meeting, and these are listed here. If you recall, one of the foundational principles from that first slide that underpin the rules is that all members have equal rights, privileges, and obligations. So this slide sets out some of those obligations. Leave that up for a moment. There is an order of business that you will see on every agenda, including the one before you today. At every meeting, the chair will call for declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. If a matter comes up before the committee for which you or a close family member have a pecuniary interest, you are required to disclose the interest, and this must be done verbally and in writing. And if you have questions about this, city clerk staff can provide some guidance, and guidance is also available from the Office of the Integrated Commissioner. The chair will call for the confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting, and you will have had an opportunity to review those online because we do our best to get minutes out within 2 days from the date of a meeting. Okay. And then the committee considers each item one at a time, and once the agenda is complete, the chair adjourns the meeting and no motion to adjourn required. So, a meeting agenda. You will have received an agenda for today's meeting. The agendas are digital. We have a digital first approach. So you will have been emailed a link. And the agenda lists the items of business in the order in which they will be considered and also serves as public notice of the meeting. The committee secretary, so Jonathan is the committee secretary to your committee, prepares and publishes and distributes an agenda for each meeting. And agendas are published online to the city's CMMIS website, and we will send you a link once the agenda for a meeting is available. You're also encouraged to sign up for automatic e-alerts to receive notifications that pertain to this committee, including when an agenda has been published. City agendas take a little getting used to, but they do contain lots of information, including the links to all of the documents that have been submitted for a meeting. And so just on this page here, the simplified rules establish how an item can be added to an agenda. Because remember, the chair will go through every item in order. You, as committee members, may add items to the agenda. So if you have an idea for an item, reach out to program staff from Social Development, Finance Administration, or from the CABRE unit, or to the city clerk's office, and we can help you finalize your item with respect to both content and form, and make sure it fits within the scope of the committee's mandate. Agenda items may also be placed on the agenda, and the list is on the slide here. In addition to one of you, City Council, a council committee, a local board of the city, or a city official. And this addresses a little bit, I think, Anne's question on the earlier item as to how how information flows. As Deputy Mayor Thompson alluded, City Council may place an item on the agenda by referring it to the advisory committee for consideration, as may another committee of council or a city official. On the right on the slide, I took a screenshot of an agenda and its component parts. So every item on an agenda has a unique identifier, and that's a combination of the committee code, the meeting number, and the agenda item number. So this here, what you're looking at, is the item from the executive committee that created the present advisory committee. And so EX is the committee code for the executive committee. 16 is that it was the 16th meeting of the committee in this term of council, and 1, the first item on that agenda. And these codes become useful if ever you want to search for an item within the city's database. Just to the right, where it says ward all. So many items are relevant to the city as a whole, which of course this one is. Some items are ward specific and pertain to something happening at a specific address, in which case you would see a ward number up in that right-hand corner. Some items originate with a report or a letter. So item EX 16.1 originated with a report from the city manager. If you as a committee member were to introduce an item to an agenda, that might be a letter from you. And a way to do that would be to submit a letter prior to the agenda closing, and with a summary of the item and any recommendations that you may wish to put forward. And the summary just provides a little bit of history and context about the item. So there is an order in which items are disposed of. The chair brings the item forward. There may be a staff presentation offered by a city official, such as the presentations you are hearing today. Or occasionally, there may be a presentation by an outside organization appearing at the invitation of the committee or city staff. And on today's agenda, you have 2 such presentations, item 8 and 9. There may be public speakers who have registered to address the committee, and committee members may ask questions of public presenters. Members may ask questions of staff and speak to the item, and that moment for speaking to the item is your opportunity to move motions. And of all of these processes, really only the first and the last must take place. The chair must call the item forward for your consideration, and the committee must vote. Okay. The committee must vote because there must be a decision on every item. And through its decisions, the committee fulfills its role as a council advisory body. So the committee may make recommendations to city officials on matters within their jurisdiction. It may make recommendations to a council committee. It may make recommendations to city council on the matter on the council agenda. And a recommendation that requires action by city officials or city council must first be considered by the appropriate council committee. Shanali from the city manager's office gave a presentation on the governance structure and where advisory committees fit into that structure and the decision-making process. So this is a little bit more context. Okay, so every item must be voted on, and what the committee effectively is voting on is a motion. So decision is made by voting on a proposal contained in a motion. The committee may receive the item for information, and that simply is to acknowledge the matter and take no further action. The committee may defer the item to a future meeting. That is, it may postpone consideration until a specific time or a specific condition has been met. The committee may adopt the recommendations contained in the item, or it may amend or add new recommendations. So that is to vary the main proposal or propose an additional action. And motions to amend are substantive. We would request to receive these in advance whenever possible. so that City Clerk's office staff can help get them into a proper format that can then be adopted into a clear and direct committee decision. And of course, our staff will help preparing the motion. Motions are typed and displayed, should be read aloud so that all members hear and understand the proposal. Do not need to be seconded. And the chair will rule motions which are not within the mandate of the committee out of order. Okay. Voting is one of those responsibilities that all members have. All members present must vote unless prevented by law. A majority vote is required to pass a motion. Motion fails if the vote is tied. And members may vote by show of hands or ask to have the vote recorded in the minutes. In a virtual WebEx setting, members continue to vote the same way, with their show of hands on video. If a recorded vote is requested in a WebEx meeting, the clerk will call out the name of each member, and the member will state if they are in favor or opposed to the proposition. Quorum is the minimum number of members required to be present to conduct a meeting. Yours is a committee of 15 members, so quorum is 8. And on the point of absences, this is a point that Robin raised in her presentation. It's worth repeating. If you are going to be absent, please do let us know so that we can prepare a motion that will be moved at the end of the meeting to excuse any absentees. And that is because if you are absent from 3 meetings in a row without being excused by motion, your seat will become vacant and you would no longer be a member of the committee. Okay, so this is my last slide. I know we are, I don't want to take too much more of your time. I'm going to take 30 seconds. I'm going to follow this link here because this is our meeting management information portal. And if I click on this link, it takes you to a page that you may be familiar with. And this is where all agendas, minutes, decisions, and information pertaining to this committee are posted. So you can look for this committee. There's a drop-down list here. You can look by name. They're listed under other boards and committees. Or you can look by meeting schedule. So today we are May 21st. Here is our committee meeting. A question came up around deadlines, when the agenda closings are. 10 business days prior to a committee meeting is the agenda closing. There's a little trick built into the calendar. If you actually click on the date, it's a hyperlink, and it brings up all the meetings taking place that day, and it shows you what the agenda closing deadlines are. So if you are thinking about submitting an item to the committee and are wondering what the time frame might be, by all means call us. But there's also a little trick that you can do by clicking on the date. So when you click on the committee, this takes you to the meeting container. And there are some tabs across the top that generate documents. So there's the agenda tab, which will generate the agenda and all its attachments. 2 other tabs that will appear after this meeting are the minutes tab that will appear once the minutes have been published, and also a video archive. So right now there's a live webcast. People who are tuning in from home can click here to watch on YouTube. Once the meeting is complete, the meeting will be recorded and will be included as a live webcast here. And remember how I mentioned that every meeting has an identifier? If you wanted to follow a decision on a particular item, there's a little search icon here. So EX 16.1 is that example that we used on the previous page. And that takes you directly to the item. And it tells you when the item was considered by City Council, when it was considered by committee, the decision on the item, all the background information. It's all there. There is an option to email the item. You can click on this button and email it to yourself or to your network. You can print the item, and you can also, by clicking these links, will take you directly to the meeting where the item was considered. And as this meeting is in the past, you can see that there's a video archive here, and the minutes are published. And the other link on that last page in my presentation takes you to, this is the last thing I'm going to show you, and it takes you to our homepage, where you can subscribe to council and committee updates. And if you haven't done this yet, it allows you to click on the decision body that you are interested in following. So in our case, we would scroll down to other boards, Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee, you click, and a few more clicks will ask you to confirm that you're registered. But what this will do is that this will ensure you're subscribed to receive all the updates that have to do with this committee, including any meetings that are scheduled, agendas, minutes, and so on. So I will stop there, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much for a great presentation, Sylvia. Okay, folks, it's now your turn to ask questions, seek clarification on the presentation which you've just seen. So I'm just flipping through to see if I can see any folks putting their hands up or anyone unmuting themselves. So what say you? Do you have questions for Sylvia? Just giving it some more time here. Okay. All right. So I see no questions for you, Sylvia. So thank you. It means that you've done a great job and everyone understands what you presented. And so I'm very happy for that. Anyone wishing to speak on this particular item?
I'd just like to say thank you. It was very well presented and very clear. Thanks a lot.
Did you want to move the item, Bennett?
I will move this item.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. So Anne has spoken and she has moved the item, and all those in favor of the item, I see a show of hands, please. Okay. Oppose? That carries. Thank you. That item has been dealt with, and again, thank you. So we're moving now to item CR 1.5. It's the election of a co-chair, and I do have their staff have made the recommendation with respect to a name, and that's Justice Betty. However, I will come to that moment in a moment and ask Miss Betty if she is willing to accept that nomination. But I'll come to you in one moment, other than to simply say that if there are any others who might be interested in this position, they should also put forward a name or nomination. So I will go through the nomination process. Are there any nominations for co-chair of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee? I mentioned that I was submitting the name of, I'm submitting Justice Betty. Justice Betty, do you accept that nomination firstly?
I do, thank you.
Thank you. Let me see whether or not there are any additional nominations. I think someone has their speakers unmuted, so if you can just mute that, or unless you wish to speak, please. Okay, I think, Juanita, I think you have your...
So what does it mean to be co-chair?
Pardon me?
Can you just break it down? What does it mean to be co-chair exactly?
Well, as staff...
What does that entail?
Well, as staff had indicated earlier, with respect to that co-chair, if the chair is not available, is going to chair the meeting.
Oh, got it.
So that person is working with, in conjunction. That person's part of the, the leadership body of this body, if you will. So in the case where I'm unavailable to attend a meeting, for example, the co-chair would be taking over those duties. Cool. Okay, just wonder if you can, if you're not speaking further, just unmute your mic for me. Just thank you. Okay. All right, so I'm just flipping through. So, are there any other persons wishing to be nominated? So this is a second call for nomination for a co-chair. Just looking at the screen. Okay, seeing none. I'm going to call for a third time, and this is the third and final time, so I'm calling for nomination. It's the third and final time. Are there any further nominations for co-chair? Okay. As I see no further nomination, this nomination is now closed. So since we have only one person whose name has been moved forward, I now declare that, and Justice Betty is that nominee, I now declare that Justice Betty, and Mr. Clerk, you can tell me if I need to take a vote on this, because I guess there is no other person who is actually standing for nomination. I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. So, Jonathan, would you add your voice, please?
Mr. Chair, you are correct. There's only one nomination, and the chair can declare the one nominee as the vice chair or co-chair of the committee.
Okay, thank you very much. So I so declare and congratulate Justice Betty on your co-chairing of this advisory committee. I would ask if you had any comments or anything you wish to say to members of the advisory committee.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, committee. As I've expressed to various members of CABLE already, I am super honored to be on this committee and exceptionally honored to be serving as co-chair and to be working with each and every one of you to figure out exactly what the solutions are that we're going to develop and bring forward to affect members of the Black community in Toronto and truly be a part of what is an exceptionally historic committee and codify that playbook for jurisdictions around the world to really think about what tackling anti-Black racism at the city level and beyond looks like. And really, really excited to be doing this in the company of all of you now through November 2022. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Justice. And again, congratulations and looking forward to working with you. So great. All right. That item has now been dealt with. I don't have to vote on it. I don't have to do anything because it's been completed. Okay. Moving right along, members. The next item is item CR 1.6, context and the formation of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Committee. We have Denise Andrea Campbell from Social Development and Finance, and Ania Adele Grant, who's a Director of Community Resources, Social Development, Finance, and Administration, two of the very dynamic individuals who are part of this great feature, which is the Confronting Anti-Black Racism unit of the city, and obviously providing advice to the committee. So I will now turn it over to both Denise and Anania. Denise, are you there?
Yes, I am, Deputy Mayor. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and congratulations to Co-Chair Betty. Welcome, and beautiful welcome to all of the new advisory committee members today. We are so honored that you are to be here with you on this historic inaugural meeting. At this point, my name is Denise, and I am the Executive Director of Social Development, Finance, and Administration Division. But I'm also the staff initiator of the city's work to confront anti-Black racism. So it's an honor and a really touching moment personally and professionally to see this particular milestone. So joining me for this presentation is my incredible co-architect in this work to create the Toronto Action Plan to Confront Anti-Black Racism, IAMNIA, and it is our immense pleasure to both welcome all of you as well as to orient you on some of the history and the context of anti-Black racism work here at the city. So I'm going to ask the clerk if you can bring up our presentation and perhaps move right into the next slide, please. Thank you. So the Toronto Action Plan to Confront Anti-Black Racism and the unit that's dedicated to its implementation is housed in our division, Social Development, Finance, and Administration. And I must apologize to you. You've seen that we're already doing this, but you've now stepped into the structure of a world where we use a lot of acronyms, and it's probably because municipal titles are so darn long. So I'm going to refer to our division as SDFA throughout the presentation. We are a small but mighty division that is based inside the community and social services area of the city. SDFA drives the city's commitment to create a more equitable, inclusive, and safe Toronto for all residents. At the core of our work and mandate is a strong commitment to partnering with residents and community agencies to understand structural barriers that are creating vulnerability for people in our city and developing policies, programs, and services to reduce that vulnerability and improve the life chances of equity-denied communities. This mandate requires that we're always working across our entire system, meaning other divisions, other city agencies and corporations, council, intergovernmentally, and with communities. Next slide, please. So I'd like to take you back to 2016. At this time, there were no strategies or specific initiatives at the city dedicated intentionally and overtly to addressing anti-Black racism. Despite council had approved a number of initiatives working with underserved communities and equity-denied groups, outcomes for Black Torontonians, as we all know, were increasingly included increasingly high rates and poor outcomes. At this time, we saw things that reaffirmed the vulnerable place of Black Torontonians as a result of structural anti-Black racism. So Black Torontonians were victims of 85% of hate crimes in Toronto, where racism was the motivating factor. 42% of children in care of the Children's Aid Society are Black, which is 5 times the representation of the overall population. Black students were are leaving school at twice the rate of white students. The unemployment rate among Black Torontonians was nearly twice the time of the provincial rate. And Black girls and women were one of the fastest growing incarcerated groups within the city. Communities were also making increased calls for action to address these issues, further spurred by the death of Andrew Loku. Encampments, protests, sit-ins, and overall advocacy on behalf of Black communities increased significantly during this time. So on April 20th, 2016, Mayor Tory and Chief Saunders of Toronto Police Services at the time hosted a meeting with Black leaders to discuss issues of systemic racism following the Black Lives Matter 2-week encampment at police headquarters. And during that meeting, Mayor Tory committed to holding a town hall with Black Torontonians to talk about the impacts of anti-Black racism in Toronto and measures to address it. Given my role in the organization, the mayor requested that I guided him and his office in this process to respond. Well, after decades of advocacy and organizing led by Black communities here in Toronto and strong Black leaders like the Black Action Defense Committee and Black Lives Matter, I knew that there was a deep expectation of Black Torontonians that the city as the government closest to the people take intentional, targeted, committed steps to addressing anti-Black racism and improving the life chances of an entrenched and contributing community in the city. And so I helped the mayor and his team commit to a process to create a dedicated action plan to confronting anti-Black racism. Next slide, please. So we all know, especially this group of most excellent leaders across our community, we know that large institutions can often struggle to change. And the city is no different to any large institution. Sometimes strong community pressure isn't always enough. The Black Lives Matter Toronto encampment at police headquarters in March 2016 was critical community pressure for our system. And internally, it also helped that through my division, SDFA, Council had been steadily building an infrastructure of strategies and approaches to focus on equity within our city. So from the strong neighborhood strategy in 2005 that targeted under-resourced neighborhoods, the Toronto Youth Equity Strategy in 2014 focused on youth most vulnerable to violence, the 20-year poverty reduction strategy adopted in 2015, and then 2 years later, equity responsive budgeting, trying to ensure a corporate conversation about how we're resourcing equity actions within our city. So this building of an equity infrastructure was a platform that I saw as an opportunity to drive this work. I had the privilege of leading the development of each of those strategies, and operationally, SDFA leveraged each one in its own time to target more equitable outcomes for equity-denied communities. But the fact basis that under and unemployment, dropout and push-out rates, criminalization, child apprehension kept us trying to center Black Torontonians without an explicit mandate to do so. So in 2016, I saw an opportunity to shift that. Next slide, please. During this period, of course, a number of important research, reports, and decisions beyond the city aided our efforts to develop an explicit mandate to confront anti-Black racism. So in front of you on the slide, you see the Black Experience Project. Under suspicion, the research and consultation report on racial profiling from the Ontario Human Rights Commission, and of course, A Better Way Forward, the Ontario Anti-Racism Action Plan from the province. These added a sense of urgency, scope, and legitimacy to our efforts here at the city, and a critical reminder that a municipal government acting alone could not fully address anti-Black racism. Others needed to be implicated and accountable. Next slide, please. This new advisory is filled with folks who have been making change in your careers and in your lives. And so you know that working to shift change in any institution, and certainly here at the city, requires that we understand and leverage the city levers that are available to us to have immediate as well as long-term impact. The levers before you have been leveraged in the actions and commitments in the Toronto Action Plan to confront anti-Black racism. They speak to the municipal role as an employer, a policymaker, a service provider, a procurer of goods and services, a regulator, a facilitator of civic engagement, and an order of government. I'd like to underscore that the success of the plan and of the work, your work as an advisory committee, will depend on your ability to adequately understand the various jurisdictional responsibilities here at the city and with other governments, and how they work together to leverage these levers so that we not only address barriers for Black communities, but we also are increasing access to opportunities. As you heard, the clerk, SDFA staff, and your chair, Deputy Mayor Thompson, are here to help you navigate that. Next slide, please. So to begin confronting anti-Black racism here in Toronto, the City of Toronto partnered with Black leaders and organizations to create and implement a three-phase process. So phase one was the development and launch of the Toronto for All Public Education campaign, focused on anti-Black racism in November 2016. It named and challenged anti-Black racism in the broader public and internally with city leaders, and begun building a culture of learning about anti-Black racism here in the organization. Phase 2 was the review of 41 years worth of research and recommendations about addressing anti-Black racism in Toronto. Recognizing that we needed the wisdom and expertise of Black communities to identify where to focus, we used the research review to inform discussions of 41 community conversations between January and March 2017 to determine how best to take meaningful action going forward. Hundreds of Torontonians of African descent contributed to those priorities and recommendations that I brought to Council for consideration. Next slide, please. So all of that work led to City Council approving an interim action plan in June 2017 and a 5-year plan in December of 2017. Council unanimously adopted the Toronto Action Plan to confront anti-Black racism right before the holidays, and I have to say it was an incredible moment both for the community members that were critical in creating this work and for the staff here supporting it. In February of 2018, in approving the 2018 operating budget, City Council also approved funding for the creation of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit. And as you heard from Deputy Mayor, it's a first of its kind in North America and perhaps beyond. Ainania, my partner, is through that journey, became its first manager. And she will now take you to the now and to the next in our context. Over to you, Ainania. Next slide, please.
Thank you so much, Denise. This is indeed a very important point where you turn it over to me because that's exactly what happened after we worked so efficiently, I think, and effectively on the plan, and I chose to come into the city as a staff and establish the unit. So I wanna just talk to you a little bit about where we are, where we went after that plan was passed. So we now have, as Denise said, an action plan to confront the anti-Black racism that has positioned the City of Toronto as a leader on municipal anti-Black racism policies, programs, protocols, practical interventions, and overall equity leadership lens, really, in the city. The plan lays out an ambitious 5-year mandate, a 5-year plan mandated by Black community as approved by Council. It includes, and I encourage you to certainly take some time to read the plan if you have not done so, yet it includes 22 recommendations and 80 actions to address 5 issue areas, none that is of surprise to you who are here: children and youth development, health and community services, job and income supports, policing and the justice system, and community engagement and Black leadership. As Denise mentioned, we launched this plan and the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit that you're hearing being called KBAR or CABR for short. And so we launched this plan in May 2018 and began reporting out to City Council in June 2019 on the progress made. And we do that each year. Anthony will talk to you more about the processes. The CABR staff will work closely with City of Toronto divisions, its agencies, its boards and commissions annually to identify priorities for that year aligned with priorities which are reported out to Council
Jonathan, how are we doing with respect to the problem?
Hi, Councillor Thompson. It's Craig from Committee Room 2 at City Hall.
Hi, Craig.
For some unexpected reason, the whole codec went down. We dialed back in, and you should be good to go. It just took us a while to get the audio connected back, and I will inform both Jonathan and Manesh that we are back up and running. We didn't shut down the recording, so we'll just have to clip out the empty spot, but you're good to go now, Councillor.
Fantastic. Thank you, Craig. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay, great. We'll just wait a few more minutes, folks. We had indicated to folks that at 4:30 we would reconvene, and Anania will get you back up and running. And as I said earlier, the technical issues have a tendency to pop up, and so what is it they say, that to be forewarned is to be forearmed, right? So we are.
It's all good. It will work out.
Absolutely. This is such a marvelous group of people. Just amazing.
Yeah. So Jonathan, when you start back, just go back to that slide with the infrastructure, and then I'll take it from there.
Okay, folks, we'll be resuming in approximately 1 minute. I hope everybody is ready to go. Is that the slide, Anania? You're still muted.
The one before that, please, Jonathan.
That's the one.
Yeah. So whenever you're ready, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you. Just get started right on the half hour, so we'll be getting there shortly. Okay, everybody, we are back. We did have a challenge with the feed, and staff have informed me that they have found the problem and they have resolved the issue, so we are back in session. This meeting is resumed. Anania, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thanks for everybody's patience. So I was speaking to the importance of ensuring that we had an infrastructure that not only around the team, the CABR team itself, and ensuring that we had the CABR team was established, but also ensuring that there was support and support around and under the CABR team. And so what that looks like, along with the manager and the policy development officer and community development officer, was also the interdivisional team. So we created an interdivisional team that was made up of city agencies, commissions, boards, and the divisions itself. So leaders in that team, as well as a Black Staff Network, the Partnership and Accountability Circle that Anthony will speak more to. I want to just make a note there that the Partnership and Accountability Circle was one of the recommendations from the plan. So it was important from the community's perspective to ensure that the city was held accountable and the action plan was held accountable to be implemented. And finally, I want to mention that among all of that was ensuring that youth was also involved. So there is an internship program, and along with the rest of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism team, there is also a rotating youth internship program that we have, bringing in two Black youth at a time to experience and be part of and contribute to the city work. Next slide, please. And so, this work we've had a lot of successes, indeed, and we've just begun. But it has not been without challenges. And as we were entering our third year of work, our second year, in fact, of work, 2019, we were faced with globally the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, but also a racial uprising. And while this could seem to many as a spoke in a wheel, as a stop, it really wasn't, because what happened in all of this is that there was highlighting of anti-Black racism. We were able to see, the world was able to see what we're talking about. And so while the city took leadership in addressing anti-Black racism, what the uprising did and what the COVID pandemic did, it brought to the surface all of what we had been talking about, but also created action. So when we look at COVID, for instance, next slide, please, and what happened for us as Black community through COVID, we were looking at, by December 2019, we were looking at a 26% COVID rate among Black people in Toronto, where we're only 9% of the population. And that raised a lot of sight, but it also raised a lot of responses that was positive. So I always want us to look at, in the midst of the negative, in the midst of all the challenges, what this did was highlight our work, highlighted the Confronting Anti-Black Racism work, and gave us, I think, some even greater levers to make sure that we were responding to the needs of Black people particularly, and that we were addressing anti-Black racism within the city and beyond. Next slide, please. So I want to share with you some of the strategic responses that we've had to this work for our Black community. And so just these are simply, I must say, simply highlights. And you, if you get it, I encourage you to look at our reports. And so in 2020, 2021, we saw a lot of strategic investments from the city to Black community, as I mentioned, with the heightening of the racial uprising as well as COVID. The creation of the vaccine equity approach with a focus on Black communities and the establishment of the Black Scientist Task Force on vaccine equity. Over 14 Black scientists that were specifically brought together to help the city to address the hesitancy among the Black community, but beyond that, also bring information to Black community so that they could make intelligent decisions with regards to the vaccine, but also gave recommendations to the city on how to address anti-Black racism as it relates to COVID. That's a significant win. And in that, we were able to provide culturally appropriate education, culturally appropriate responses, including food, including mental health, how we supported Black community around mental health. And I could go on. That was a really, really significant moment. The Mayor's Roundtable on Black businesses, and I encourage you to look at what's happening, particularly in Eglinton West and other places. And our chair for this advisory is also the chair of economic development. So significant work is happening there with an anti-Black racism analysis. Over 2.1 million dispersed to 21 Black mandated organizations across Toronto to meet emergency needs of Black Torontonians during COVID. A city committed to launch the Black mandated funding framework. So we are launching a framework specifically to support Black mandated organizations. Next slide, please. Thank you so much, Jonathan. And I can't leave this conversation without bringing to your awareness, and I know that Mr. Chair has pointed this out, but I want you to just look at what has happened as a result of your voices, of Black people's voices. And so on March 25th, 2019, the city of Toronto began to recognize the International Decade for People of African Descent. And out of that, many other things have happened. If you've not had a chance to go downtown, and I know we're culturally, we're socially distancing, I encourage you to go to the sign and see one of the things that has come out of that. Jonathan, the next slide, please. And so I want to end off here and just speak to how important your role is. You get an opportunity to really impact changes. This is historic, but I say that it's beyond historic. It's because, you know, we can talk about history, but the impact of your role, of your position as a council advisory body is significant. I encourage you to reach out to us. Let us help you, help us, and help our community as a whole. Look at the work that you're about to do as strategic. You know, always thinking about how do we create legacy? How do we change policies so that we're talking about a targeted universalism approach, so that we're addressing a universal equity work that needs to be done with a targeted lens. Intersectional, right? We've invited, so we're not, Black community is not just one, we don't look one way, we don't feel one way, we don't do one thing. We're multifaceted, and we come from many different parts with different ways of being. And so as you look at policies that we need to change, please remember to include persons with disabilities, Black people with disabilities, Black LGBTQ community, queer and trans community, our seniors, and so many others. Take an intersectional lens to the work that you're about to put forward. And look at the immediate as well as the long term. So as we talked about COVID, one of the things we looked at, we saw as we did the work on COVID, is that we needed to address immediate needs, because COVID is real and folks are dying. We needed to address immediate needs, but we also needed to look at the strategic need. And so along with all the immediate responses, we're also doing a Black health plan. We're doing a Black food plan. And so let's look at both now and in the future. And of course, we cannot do anything without looking at the intergovernmental approach, because the city cannot do everything. So where is your role in advocating? And so thank you again so very much for saying yes. And please let us, I guess, as I said, please let us help you in moving this needle forward and moving it forward strategically. Thank you so very much, Mr. Chair, for having me.
Thank you very much, Anania and Denise. I know that time is not our friend at the moment, but we will continue to forge on. But I wanted to ask if there are any questions of Anania or Denise from members.
I do have a question. I'm going to try to keep it very brief and quick. I
can't see who's speaking. I'm just flip over.
It's Maya.
Hi, Maya. Go ahead, please. I just have to flip my screen. Go ahead, please.
No problem. So it's very clear that you guys really have this in-depth understanding of inner city governmental structures. And I'm going to be 100% honest, I didn't know much about it until this presentation. And so I guess my question is just in the spirit of keeping things strategic and being proactive with the decisions that we make. I just wanted to ask you, in the spirit of keeping it real, what do you think are some of the challenges that we might face in our role? And how do you suggest that we mitigate those challenges?
So Denise, Anania?
So I think I think that because one of the things that, even though we're building an infrastructure and we are highlighting for you both a journey with a tremendous body of accomplishment, we have so far to go. And so every time I say we've achieved some things, you know, the road is much longer. So I think that's an important thing for you to keep in mind, that that there is a very long road for us, and that we need, I think the advantage of having you, to Ainania's point in that last slide, as a body, is that you're able to bring a certain amount of clarity and pressure on some key strategic moves to help advance the work that we're all trying to do. And I would say, don't be dissuaded in that. Like, don't get our system is complex. There's a lot of moving parts, but I think the more that you can be clear about what your priorities are within our broader work, and what some of those key things you want to advance are, working with Deputy Mayor Thompson, and then obviously us in service to this committee, the more that it will help us collectively use all the levers that we have. So I think that probably is the most fundamental. The other thing, and then I'll stop talking, perhaps others can jump in, but is to say that so much of what you saw in our history is about like fierce, clear positions meeting really strategic opportunities that are happening in the world, right? We are deeply opportunistic in this world. So as you are doing other things in the richness of your lives and in your professions outside of this table, if you're also seeing opportunities or trends that can then impact what we do together, bring that to our attention. Because I think, you know, the ability to arrive on various changes, whether that's in the private sector, in health, in education, in justice, is going to be really critical to move forward. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Just before we go to Hemlo, Anania, any comments you wanted to add to the question?
Yeah, I want. The only thing I'd add is when I see the who is on this advisory, you come with such amazing skills and talent, and you have sectorial knowledge, and I would encourage you to use that sectorial knowledge to advance the work. You know, don't hold back, as Denise said.
Thank you. Elimo?
Just to follow up with what Anani and Denise were saying, in terms of encouraging us to utilize our positions on this advisory board, as well as what you had said earlier, Deputy Mayor, about being proactive and looking at agendas and seeing areas where we could provide that advice. Is there a process in terms of doing so? Like, would the best way of doing that be going through the city staff to get some support around doing it strategically? Do we need to then bring it back to the advisory board to let them know what we're doing kind of on our own on the side as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll just start at Denise. Can I just interject here for a moment? I spoke earlier on about us talking about this idea around the Slack channel, an opportunity for us to talk, because as Denise has pointed out, and Anania, this is a big mountain, right? And we will get to some elements. The peak is much, much, much higher, right? And so in order to get there, we have to chip away and we have to use all the right tools to climb in unison and together. And so it's really super important for us to simply not look at this advisory committee as a static thing where we meet 4 times a year. I would submit to you that what we really need to be doing is to have ongoing dialogues amongst ourselves, and we'll be discussing with the co-chair and staff, and then coming at you. We should establish a framework for ongoing discussion. And so when members have ideas and want to bring something forward, that there's an open portal in which to bring that matter forward, and a complete understanding in terms of how that gets into the system, how that gets into the stream. And that's in collaboration with staff and our team and working together. So we have to think about our collective approach as being a unit in which we bring forward ideas to affect change and outcome. We want the betterment of everything for everyone and for the city and the collaboration and input. So I think that, as you may have questions, reach out to staff, myself, co-chair, and we'll have some conversation. But we need to establish a medium, and that I think is a Slack channel. We may come up with something else, that there's ongoing dialogue and materials and information, and so that there's an ongoing community of discussion. We talk about having subcommittees of this committee, and that's great. But in addition to that, we should have an ongoing, interactive, very dynamic process that is going to work at all times, with the ideas coming in, information, seeing what's happening elsewhere around the world, in our community and ideas that come up. So Denise, that's just a thought, but Denise, I'll turn it over to you because you were going to say something.
No, I think that's excellent, Deputy Mayor. The only other advice I would add is in that presentation by one of our colleagues that talked about the other council advisory bodies. So again, to one of our Ainania's point around the intersectionality of our community, we have been working to mainstream or embed, if you will, anti-Black racism analysis and lens and understanding in all areas of the organization. You might find some allyship, strategic allyship, with some of those other committees, and to move something that is of critical importance to this CAB. So if that's the case, we can absolutely help you in being able to connect with them and then build kind of a cross-committee agenda. This is new for us in SDFA. We've never had a CAB that we're working with so closely. So we'll be evolving our sophistication along with you, but Deputy Mayor Thompson clearly has a long and deep knowledge of the system and clerks as well. So together, I think we'd be able to support the strategies that to achieve the things that you think are important.
All right, I'm just going to see if there's any other questions on this particular issue because we do have to move along. And I'm flipping my screen, so just bear with me, please. And if anyone has anything further. All right, so I'm just going to ask one final time. Is there any additional questions on this particular item? Okay, seeing none, I want to thank you both for, again, another, very insightful and informative presentation. And I will then ask if there are any speakers to this particular item. And I'm just looking at the screen. And I see no speakers. I just simply want to then ask that we move to receive this particular item. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We're going to try to move right along, folks. I know that the time is not on our side. We are now going to turn our attention to the next item, which is CR 1.7, an overview of Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit, its structure and work. Anthony Morgan, who's you met him earlier, manager, Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit. Anthony, would you take the floor, please?
Good afternoon. Can folks hear me okay? All right, excellent. So I want to echo the thanks from Mr. Chair and now, of course, our co-chair, Ms. Justice Betty, but also thinking through the important task that you have stepped forward to take up as community members on this incredible journey that our Executive Director, Denise Andrea Campbell, and our Director, Ainania Ayodele Grant, set out. Now, there's so much that I wanted to share with you, of course, on the journey of what we've been able to do as a Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit, being grounded in and supported by our communities. But I want to make sure that I can be focused on some of the things that haven't been touched on already. So if I could take a moment to ask clerks to pull up my presentation, and we're going to do some mild slide hopping to get right to what hasn't been covered. So if we can move forward. So this slide captures the journey that both Denise and Ainania spoke to. We can move forward past that. Now, here's where we get into the crux of the way in which the Toronto Action Plan to Confront Anti-Black Racism works. Now, why we continue to refer to the action plan, of course, as you can appreciate, and as I imagine that you've gleaned from the presentations that have been delivered so far, is the action plan deeply reflects the voice of Toronto's Black communities. While we're not in a position to say that absolutely every Black Torontonian along various intersectionalities contributed to the plan, still, we are in a position to say that to date, there hasn't been a plan as community grounded and scoped by Toronto's Black communities as this one. And so we take very seriously the articulations in the Toronto Action Plan to Confront Anti-Black Racism, through the Confronting Anti-Black Racism unit. And when I speak to the action plan, generally, it's important to understand that when we're looking at these 80 actions and 22 recommendations, as a team in the Confronting Anti-Black Racism unit, we know that we can't implement everything in 1 year. And so what we do is every year we identify strategic priorities that are informed by our communities. And so what you have here is what our strategic priorities were for year 2. And so we identified year 2 as being between May 2019 and April 2020. And so we set out work plan priorities informed by communities and reorganizing the information that is within the Toronto Action Plan to confront anti-Black racism to set out 5 priorities that we reported to Council in November 2020. So what were those work plan priorities? We want to focus on building an inclusive and equitable economy, as you can see here. We wanted to support community capacity building, also create a culture of change within the city, invest in Black children and youth, and finally improve customer service. There's a range of other things that we could have focused on, but to make sure that we were moving with the timelines and tasks articulated in the action plan, this is what we prioritized for that particular year. Another point I want to make mention of that Ania has spoken really effectively to is the principle of Ubuntu. You'll hear that a lot in us working together. And for short, Ubuntu reflects the approach that we take to this work. I am because you are, and you are because I am. Or for short, I am because we are. And so when we do this work in the Confronting Anti-Black Racism unit, while we recognize the immense privilege and opportunity that we have here, any kind of hard work, brilliance, ideas, or insights that we bring forward, we recognize it as being an extension of the brilliance, insight, power, and wisdom of our communities. And we consider ourselves as vessels in that regard, and we use the Ubuntu framework and the idea of Ubuntu as that grounding norm. So we can move forward on the slide, sorry. So often a question comes up for us about how do we evaluate our work? Now, there are so many metrics of evaluation that come out of government systems and bodies, but I think if we're being really honest, Black communities would say that these are structures and metrics that don't reflect the ways in which Black communities might think about how to identify and speak to impacts on our communities. And so what we're working to do is use the Ubuntu framework, not just as a philosophical approach for our work, but as a way of evaluating the impact that we're having at the, as you see in this framework, at the personal level, thinking about it also in terms of group dynamics and interpersonal engagement, also looking at institutional and structural impacts of our work, and then finally moving out to the community or societal impact of our work. Now, there's no way that I could ever expect or hope any of you to digest this full framework now, but I want to let you know that it is a big part of how we evaluate and monitor change in the implementation of the Toronto Action Plan. We can move forward. So, as many of you may have gleaned from looking at the action plan, again, there are 80 actions and 22 recommendations. With previous presentation, identified the 5 different areas that the action plan covers more generally. But that doesn't necessarily speak to how to make sense of the entire action plan as it relates to our theory of change. And when we say theory of change, what we are speaking to in the Confronting Anti-Black Racism unit is the idea that if we support our communities in advancing certain interventions collectively and collaboratively with community, but also interdivisionally among different parties, divisions, and agencies of the city, then we will create the best opportunity for change for Toronto's Black communities. So what is that theory of change? So that theory of change for the CABR unit, for the Confronting Anti-Black Racism unit, and for the adoption of the action plan covers these areas: staff recruitment and advancement, the collection and reporting of race-based disaggregated data, supporting collaborative service planning, community investment. 5, we have youth mentorship and employment. We can move forward on the slide. 6, public education. 7, policy development. 8, intergovernmental advocacy. And finally, staff learning. All of the actions in the Toronto Action Plan to confront anti-Black racism collectively, they fall under one of these 9 interventions. So the idea is, if we work with our communities and work with our partners as members of city staff to make interventions in these specific areas to advance the well-being and interests of Black communities, again, will create the best possibilities for constructive outcomes for our communities that have been called for, and frankly, as you all know, through your work in leadership and community, are long overdue. We can move forward in our slide. So one of the structures you may be familiar with because of the research that you did to prepare yourself for the interviews or to get ready for today's meeting is the Partnership and Accountability Circle. You may have read about it or seen the name or just heard the name and want to get a sense of what it is. I would offer this in terms of understanding the relationship between the Partnership and Accountability Circle as a program advisory body to the CABR unit and your role, committee members, as members of a council advisory committee. I would encourage you to think about it as kind of a concentric circle. And within that, the middle of that concentric circle would be the Toronto Action Plan to confront anti-Black racism and the CBR unit and various structures I'll speak to in a moment. And then outside of that first circle, you might see yourselves as members of the council advisory body, focus on also addressing anti-Black racism. But while we are really proud of the Toronto Action Plan and the ways in which it reflects the interests, advice, ideas, and needs of Toronto's Black community, we also recognize that no plan is comprehensive. No plan can touch on all the various issues of concern for Toronto's Black communities. And so as a council committee, as you'll have noted from your mandate, from the terms of reference for this body, that there are intergovernmental issues that fall outside of the city's purview, where we're hoping that you can be a force to help build the connections so that, as was said before, even if we are able to align ourselves right at a city level, we know that success largely depends on the ways in which we collaborate at the provincial level and the federal level. And so you folks in the council advisory body will, of course, have an interest and speak to at different times what's happening within the action plan itself. However, on the day-to-day, we have an ongoing relationship and conversation with the Partnership and Accountability. You should know that we had a first iteration of the Partnership and Accountability Circle, which and the members had a 2-year term, which ended recently. And so just yesterday, just a couple of days ago, we started the orientation process for the new Partnership and Accountability Circle. Their contact information, their bios, their information will be made available online once they complete the orientation process, which will be the end of next week. And you'll have additional information, and I anticipate active conversation between the council advisory body and the Partnership and Accountability Circle. But all that said, I haven't spoken specifically to what the PAC, or Partnership and Accountability Circle, does. And see on this slide here, we identify the different ways in which the PAC supports the implementation of the Toronto Action Plan by providing guidance on how to make sure that we're planning and implementing the action plan, but also providing insight about opportunities or gaps that exist in how we are rolling out the action plan itself. We get different kinds of advice on partnerships that we're seeking, ways to engage our city staff, how to show up for our communities, where to show up, and what particular issues we should be prioritizing, specifically as it relates to the Toronto Action Plan to confront anti-Black racism. The Partnership and Accountability Circle also is critical in supporting us with identifying critical partnerships that we need to be making on the ground in community, but also with agencies that might not be Black-led, but are doing important critical work to support Black communities so that we can identify the right partners to work with, not just in community, but also at different levels of government. And finally, the PAC helps to facilitate transparent and effective communication. So being a voice into community, similar to the ways in which you as members have stepped forward because of your leadership and love and support for Black communities, they too have a role within community where they translate some of what's happening with the implementation of the action plan into community, and also translate what communities' voices, ideas, and concerns might be, and identification of opportunities back into us as a staff team in the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit to address change. We can move forward. So I'm not going to speak to this in detail, but I really think it's important. Your eyes might be looking at the screen and wondering, well, where do we start? Don't try to make sense of it just now. The point here is to note that the Council Advisory Committee that you've decided to join, and we thank you for that, is also part of a much broader infrastructure that we've been working actively under the direction of Ainania Grant and Denise Andrea Campbell, and also with the support of Deputy Mayor Thompson and Mayor Tory, of course. And I would argue our collectively City Council, we've been able at different strategic points to build an infrastructure to advance change. And so this body is critically important to that overarching architecture for the advancement of Black communities and our well-being within this city. We can move forward. Now, I want to take some time to speak to the things that have been achieved to date, because often we hear announcements and fanfare about different initiatives that are launched, but then the question often becomes, well, what are you actually doing? And so I'm going to just walk through some of the critical achievements that we've made, starting with the area of creating a culture change at the city. So thus far, since May 2018, we've been able to have more than 2,000 staff and city staff, and also all Toronto Police Service staff completing anti-Black racism training, and that's since May 2018. We've helped to establish a Black staff network that comes directly out of the voice of community, and it's a deliverable in the action plan. And so we now have this network that supports the advancement of Black staff at the city. We've also again, had the Partnership and Accountability Circle be used as a resource or engaged as a resource throughout the city to help develop a culture of thinking through what are the interests of Black communities, or how does this plan, project, or service impact the well-being of Black communities. Moving forward to thinking about how we are investing in Black children and youth, I think it's important to share that one of the first things that this unit helped to do, or the early staff of this unit under Ainania's leadership, was ensure that Black children and youth were given increased resource and support. And so more than $500,000 went to 3 Black-led organizations in the early days of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit to support the advancement of Black youth leadership programs. And we've sustained different engagements and investments to make sure that we are shoring up and following up on the support for Black youth leadership. Part of that has also included making sure that the city is adequately responsive or increasingly responsive to the particular needs of Black 2S, LGBTQI plus youth in our city, knowing that and using the framework of targeted universalism and thinking about the fact that if we are creating interventions that support the identification and removal of barriers for our most marginalized and our Black 2S LGBTQI young people experience some of the most marginalization within our city, then we will be able to create opportunities and advancements for all of our communities. And so we take very serious that intersectional approach has to be embedded in our work. I'll move forward in the slide, please. Additionally, I want to speak to the importance of the ways in which we are working to connect Black Torontonians to civic decision-making. The establishment of this council advisory committee is a part of that work, where we have tried to identify strategic points of intervention for Black voices, community members, ideas, skills, and expertise to leverage change. But of course, this is the latest among several other interventions. For instance, we've helped to establish a mayor's roundtable on Black business, where quarterly there are different meetings looking at different sectors for the advancement of Black communities or different areas of interest. So one mayor's roundtable focused on, for instance, Little Jamaica. Another focused on Jane and Finch. There's one currently underway as it relates to the Black communities and the arts. So that's just one example. Another example that I can point to is the Black Youth Fellowship that Anania spoke to, where we are thinking about ways of making sure that we're placing our young people in the right positions, extending the right opportunities, qualified, solid young people who sadly tend to be still overlooked because of the continued manifestations of anti-Black racism. And we have created a pathway for those young people to advance change within the work of the city, while continuing to partner with community organizations such as Taibu Community Health Center to lead a Black leadership governance training initiative to ensure that more Black community members are best positioned to take up roles and responsibility on boards. Finally, I want to speak to improving community service. So what that looks like for us is largely supporting the city and enhancing its data collection processes. And so there's an initiative referred to as Data for Equity that you will become very familiar with in your time of service on this committee, where we are supporting city divisions to ensure that they are collecting in a culturally appropriate, sensitive, responsible way, collecting the data on who we're serving, how we're serving, and using that information to help inform how we can better serve our communities, and also think about who we are not serving, who we're not adequately serving. And so the Data for Equity strategy is one of the major initiatives that the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit helps our city staff partners and divisions, and also agencies of the city. When we say agencies, we're referring to, as has been mentioned, for instance, the Toronto Police Service, Toronto Public Library, Toronto Transit Commission, and the Toronto Community Housing is also a key partner in that. Now, I want to move forward to the next slide to talk about our general vision. While we take very seriously and remain focused on the advancement of our Black communities, to be clear and transparent, what we're really trying to do is create a model for equitable leadership and change, not just for Black people, but for all people, through a focus on Black people. So the idea ultimately is that if we're able to develop strategic interventions in partnership with our communities and think creatively and work effectively with partners at different levels, we'll create a model that ultimately folks in other communities who are experiencing marginalization and oppression can take up and say, okay, this is a way to address change for communities. And so that's reflected in our vision and mission. Next slide, please. Now, I mentioned at the outset the year 2 work plan priorities that we reported to City Council on in November 2020. I should note generally that for any and everything that I've shared here, it's also on our website. I'm happy to answer questions after this presentation, but there might be things that we might ask or find different ways to engage our website to help answer and address, because we've really taken seriously the importance of being transparent in the advancement of this work. And so we've housed a lot of information on our website, which is toronto.ca/ABR, toronto.ca/ABR. Now, on our website, you'll see that for this year, so this year running from January to December 2021, we are looking at several priorities, and I'm just going to list them. I'm not going to speak to them in detail, but for this year, we're focusing on continuing to create a culture change at the city through continued engagement, training, evaluation, and making sure that we're evaluating the actual impact of the training, not doing one-off sessions and rolling up or folding our arms thinking that we've made the difference that we need to make. Also, a continued focus on community capacity building, and through this, looking at initiatives like supporting the development of this council advisory committee. We move forward on the slide again. One more, please. Now, many of you, especially in the week to come, will be thinking about the anniversary of the murder of George Floyd and the police-involved death of Regis Korchinski Paquette, and the conversations that touched off around, or deepened, I would say, because Black communities have been talking about police reform for arguably as long as police have existed in their current iteration in the Western world. But there was a catalytic moment in 2020 after those incidents that made us as a city also step forward and say, no, what really needs to be done to help identify alternatives to policing? And so that remains a major focus for us in this year. we can move forward. Finally, Black resilience, and this speaks to the ways in which COVID has had a significantly disproportionate impact on Toronto's Black communities, not just among those who are affected, but those who are on the labor market or working, the kinds of service that we deliver, whether it be a healthcare service or just frontline service delivery or manufacturing. Thinking about housing challenges where we have more Black people, or Black people are overrepresented in congregate settings where it is easier to spread COVID-19. And so part of our focus this year has also been on making sure that we are supporting our communities, not just to get through the pandemic, but be able to bounce back better so that we're not going back to what was before the pandemic, because that was not a status quo that's sustainable or welcome for our communities. And finally, I want to end by noting so that we can move forward on the slide. I just want to note that quickly that while I, as I mentioned, have the privilege and opportunity to lead this work as the manager of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit, I do it with a dynamic group of brilliant folks, many of whom have chipped in various ways to help make this possible. And so we have a training and development team composed of 3 folks who focus internally on developing a staff culture of learning and development opportunities to enhance, you might say, the muscle of addressing anti-Black racism, thinking through a lens of addressing anti-Black racism. We also have a keen policy team that identifies strategic outcomes and frameworks and evaluations to make sure that we are actually progressing and making change on the things we've committed to do to support Black communities. And finally, we have a community development team which works with our community partners and works with Black communities generally to identify what's needed and how we can be more responsive to what our communities are calling for and what we have long been entitled to, and that's fairness, justice, equality, and the well-being that we all like to say we are proud of within the city, but hasn't yet been fully enjoyed by Toronto's Black community members. And so I want to say thank you, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Anthony, for an excellent presentation, and I will just open up the forum for questions. Any questions for Anthony? I'm just scrolling through to see whether members have any questions. Okay, I don't see any hands, or I don't see any mics that are being unmuted. Any comments on Anthony's presentation? Okay, I'm looking through. I don't see any. All right. So, Anthony, thank you very much. And members, obviously, you have access to this information to take some more time to maybe get more acquainted with the presentation, all the presentations that's been presented to us today. All right, well, we're going to move right along. Again, time is not our friend here at this point. We've had a lot of materials to digest, and we still have more. Anthony referenced the coordination and collaboration that is necessary with the other levels of government. We have 2 other levels of government, one is the provincial government and the federal government. And it's clear to me, and it should be clear to all of you, that if this kind of work was only being done at the city level and not, the other levels of government were not doing some work related. Now, our work, I think, is it may be different from what they're doing, but we're going to learn a little bit more about what the province is doing, and then after that, our last item is what the federal government is doing. So the next item is item CR 1.8, the provincial anti-racism. Yes. Wait, I'm going to do that in a second, Jonathan. Give me a second, okay? That will be next item. So I want to turn your attention to that. So for this item, though, what Anthony has just presented, there are no speakers further to this. So we will then move to receive this item. So all those in favor, and I'm looking at the screen to make sure I see all the hands. So if I can see a show of hands of those who are in favor of receiving this item, and I think I see all the hands. So thank you very much for that, and I've already set you up for our next item. And we have with us Nosa Arrow Brown, who is the Assistant Deputy Minister for Ontario Anti-Racism Directorate, who's here with us to present to the committee. So, Ms. Brown, Ms. Arrow Brown, are you here?
Yes, I am Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you very
It's
much.
NOSA. Thank you very
It's
much. NOSA. Thank you so much.
No, sir. Thank you. You may begin.
Okay. Thanks for putting that up, Jonathan. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to you all and to the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit for inviting me here today. I know that I am probably with my colleague from the federal government standing between you and the long weekend. So I'm going to try my best to be succinct in my welcome to you and the overview of the Anti-Racism Directorate. I am truly, truly honored to be at your first committee meeting of the advisory committee and to share with you this work we're doing. And I say in English, well done, in Yoruba, ekushe, and I say in Pidgin English, una well done. So if there are three things that I want you to take away from this today, and I will go through this presentation, but just speaking to you without going through the slides, there are three main messages I come bearing today. The first is you absolutely all have a strong partner in the province in this work. And I have been privileged to work with those in the unit, Ainania, and excuse me, and to work with Anania and Denise on this work, and Anthony, and they have been fantastic. The province has a specific anti-Black racism strategy that is actually focused in core areas of child welfare, education, and justice, and competency building, and awareness raising, etc. And the strategy is there for you to leverage. The second message is, even though we have that strategy, you are starting at a very unique time because we are in the process of reviewing the strategy. So I've heard throughout today that the city cannot work alone. It's same with the province. We can't do this alone. We need everyone's help, all levels of government, and your voices are critical to the review of a strategy on anti-Black racism for the province. And that's key message number two. The third thing that I wanted you to know is that you are strategic partners here, and I was really glad to hear all of the reinforcement of that, how you can help make a difference. And the Anti-Racism Directorate is within a phone call away or an email away of collaboration. We are with you to work with our Black communities as you support supportive and positive outcomes for our Black Torontonians. So I'm not going to go through all the data and everything. You already know the need for action in the Black community. I will just go straight to slide 3, if you could, please. Yes, that slide. Thank you so much. Just to give you a quick overview of what it is that we do. So the ARD, as we like to call the Anti-Racism Directorate, our work really involves removing systemic barriers and on one hand, and advancing racial equity on the other hand. We do have a broader priority area of focus, though, on anti-Indigenous racism, including anti-Black racism and anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and anti-Asian racism. However, we have a specific anti-Black racism because of the significance of the population and the needs that require us to address and specifically confront anti-Black racism in the province. We also have legislation, so the Anti-Racism Act and regulations that require and authorize, collection of race-based data, and the standards that are established to ensure that we collect this data across different sectors. In addition, we partner with municipalities like the City of Toronto to look at not only how we advance equity, but also do the work that needs to be done on the ground in terms of race-based data collection, awareness raising, capacity building, etc. So if we move on to the next slide, please, Jonathan. We take an integrated approach, of course. This is a whole of government affair within the province. So I'll just give you a couple of points here. So we partner with the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services, for example, on the Black Youth Action Plan, which involves several prevention-focused initiatives specifically designed to support Black children and youth and families. We also work with the Ministry of Health. So we were providing advice to the guidance table, for example, around the COVID vaccines and the equity in vaccine rollout. We also work with the Ministry of Education in establishing anti-racism initiatives in the education system to improve outcomes for Indigenous, Black, and racialized students. So really, we're a catalyst for a lot of this work across government. And given the urgency of the moment, there have been other emerging priorities. So Jonathan, you can skip slide 5 and go straight to 6, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So what are we seeing from an anti-racist perspective in the province? So we're working with health, equity, stakeholders, and experts and Indigenous partners to collect data on race, income, language, household size for individuals who have tested positive for COVID-19. And we all know why we need to do that. And you know, in addition to doing that, we're trying to work with these same partners to guide the decision making as work continues to stop the spread of the virus. We are also actively supporting the Vaccine Distribution Task Force to develop a vaccine implementation strategy that addresses populations and communities, including the Black community disproportionately impacted by COVID. And because in parallel with the pandemic, there has been a rise in hate and online hate and racism. As of last year, we announced grant funding to create a new anti-racism and anti-hate grant program that also benefits the Black community. In addition to looking at health equity, of course, there is looking at inclusive economic recovery and working with partnerships in the private sector to see how we can recover from this crisis. And I like what Anthony mentioned there, bouncing back better. This is really what the inclusive economic recovery is about. And finally, one of the other ways that we make a difference is, of course, in looking at policies and equity in policies such as our procurement. Government is, one of the largest sources of procurement and contract funding, and we're looking at how we can make that more equitable in a way that targets all of our communities, especially the Black community. So moving on to the next slide, please, Jonathan. In the Ontario Public Service, of course, we have to lead by example. So go on to the next slide. What I will say here is that we have launched a roadmap to racial equity in the OPS. And what that is before we start to partner and do this work on the outside, we really have to look inwards and make sure that all of our policies have that lens applied, an anti-Black racism lens and an anti-racism lens. So in the public service, just like what's happening in the city, there's that competency and capacity building, a lot of training happening of all of our senior managers. We are looking to diversify the talent pipeline and ensure that our Indigenous, Black, and racialized staff have the same opportunities as everyone else, and also be accountable for an anti-racist and inclusive workplace. So starting really from the inside and working out. If you move on to the next slide, please. So this is where I think there is a real line of opportunity for this committee. Go on to the next slide. I'll just give you a quick overview of what the current strategy is in 5 pillars. There's a lot of policy and research initiatives that are actually legislated. So we're legislated to have the strategy, to collect the race-based data, to have an anti-racism impact assessment framework, to publicly report on progress, because we know what gets measured gets done, and we are accountable to the people of Ontario for that. To raise public education and awareness, to collaborate with the communities, and also have specific anti-racism initiatives that call out anti-Black racism and anti-Indigenous racism. This is the current strategy. We've been implementing it for the past 5 years. If you are interested in seeing all of the concrete actions underneath each one of this pillar, I would encourage you to go on ontario.ca /anti-racism directorate, and you'll be able to see our progress report and all of the actions underneath this. The area of opportunity, though, is to build on this foundation, and this is where this committee comes in. We're looking for your great ideas, because we know that race should really never limit anyone's social or economic opportunities. And given the urgency and attention on racism, and especially anti-Black racism at the moment, it's very tempting to assume that the recognition of inequity, the town halls, the conversations, the online activism is enough to bring change to organizations. And someone asked, what is the challenge here? That is one of the key challenges we're seeing. We really need action. We need to go from talking about this work to acting about this work, and that's what we're about, and that's why we're excited to be able to partner with you and the city. I really look forward to continuing our discussion and addressing any questions that you may have. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Zero Brown. That is very helpful in terms of understanding the collaboration that needs to take place, will take place, is taking place between certainly the provincial government and the city, and we'll learn a little bit more about the federal government shortly. But I wanted to ask members if there are any questions for NOSA. I'm just looking at the screen while I'm there, moving around. So, are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, moving right along. Anyone wishing to speak on this particular item? Okay, moving right along. There are no speakers. Okay, other than to then ask that this item be received. So all those in favor of receiving this item? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. We will now move to our federal component of this section, and it's CR 1.9, the Federal Anti-Racism Secretariat. We have Peter Flegel is with us, and he's the Executive Director, Federal Anti-Racism Secretariat, Multiculturalism and Anti-Racism Branch, Canadian Heritage. Peter, are you with us?
I definitely am.
Hi, how are you? Welcome.
Good, how are you?
Very well, thank you. You have the floor, sir. Thank you. It's a pleasure to hear from you.
Thank you for having me. I, too, have a PowerPoint presentation. I'm hoping we could bring it to the screen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So let me just begin by saying, saying first that I'm joining you virtually from Ottawa on the unceded and unsurrendered traditional land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I join you in the sweltering 32-degree weather, which I just discovered is warmer than in my native Haiti, which is something that I never expect to see happen. But anything is possible these days at the time of COVID, I guess. I am the descendant of. I join you as the descendant of freedom fighters who liberated what is considered a small Caribbean island from the three most powerful empires of the 18th and 19th century of the world. So definitely as someone who lives now in Canada, I exist and I work on the shoulders of countless, if not millions, who've paved the way for the opportunities that I and other people of African descent have here in Canada and around the world. So it's also important to acknowledge that as I join you. So I'm really honored to have been invited to the inaugural committee meeting of the new Confronting Anti-Black Racism Council Advisory Committee of the City of Toronto to just give you, I guess, a summary of what the Federal Anti-Racism Secretariat is. I too recognize that I am what separates you from, I'm sure, a delicious dinner. So I'm going to try to go as quickly as I can in providing you with a taste of who we are and what we do. But really want to take the moment to salute you for this inaugural meeting, which is essentially history in the making, and really look forward to hearing about the transformative work you'll be leading and the opportunities for collaboration with the federal Anti-Racism Secretariat. I think no better time for a conversation given just today was released a new Canadian Race Relations Foundation and National Survey of Canadians looking at experiences of race, and found that 78% of Black Canadians see racism as a severe problem, and 70% of Black people in Canada experience racism on a regular basis, which just shows the fact of anti-Black racism, which is something that the federal government through the Prime Minister has officially recognized for a few years now. So, what is the Federal Anti-Racism Secretariat? If we could go to the next slide, the next two slides. So, the Federal Anti-Racism Secretariat flows from Canada's anti-racism strategy. Which was launched in 2019, really based on a whole year of consultations with Black communities, Asian communities, Jewish communities, Muslim communities, Indigenous peoples, and other racialized and religious minority communities, really to center the voices and experience of those with lived experience of racism, to ensure that what the federal government does in this space is really a reflection of the priorities, the experiences, and the needs as identified. So based on that, a three-pronged strategy was identified, focused on three pillars. If we could go to the next slide. The first is demonstrating federal leadership. And so that's the notion that if the federal government is going to be active in the space of anti-racism, it needs to lead by example and address systemic racism, discrimination that may exist internally. Second, empower communities. And so that's the idea that the expertise with regards to addressing racism really lies in communities with daily lived experience of racism. So the resources need to be made available to support them. And then the third pillar is building awareness and changing attitudes, which is really recognizing that to increase the need to increase awareness of the historical roots of racism and discrimination on Indigenous peoples, Black communities, Asian communities, racialized communities, and religious minority communities writ large. If we could go to the next slide. And so the Federal Anti-Racism Secretariat really fits under the first pillar, I should say. And so if we go to the next slide, so essentially, if I were to use a few words to describe who and what we are, would be a center of expertise that acts as a hub, a convener, and a catalyst. And so how do we play that? Well, first, what does that mean, and how do we play that role? Well, essentially, as a hub, we are acting as a one-stop shop, connecting community to government opportunities which historically have been unavailable. So trying to break down those barriers, and vice versa for the federal departments and institutions that do not have pre-existing relations with a variety of different racialized communities, Indigenous peoples, and religious minorities. We help to bridge that gap and create those connections. So concretely, we do that through town halls, through one-on-one meetings and other kind of mechanisms to make those critical connections to inform the policy-making process. And to give you a concrete example, I'll use the example of the work that we've been doing around anti-Black racism, the International Decade, as a clear kind of concise example. So for the when COVID hit, when it started to hit and impact Canada in March of 2020. We immediately started to hear from stakeholders from a variety of communities, including Black communities, that something was wrong. The pandemic was already having a disproportionate impact, but the data wasn't available, and media reports were not focusing on this, the racialized component or dimension of the COVID pandemic. Nonetheless, based on what we heard, we immediately jumped into action and set up an interdepartmental task force called the Equity Seeking Communities and COVID-19 Task Force, which brings together 25 key federal departments and institutions, including the central agencies, to really get a good understanding of what the issues are, develop common approaches, connect with communities so that we truly understand the situation, and then try to ensure that the federal response recovery measures are adequately fashioned to address the distinct and specific needs of communities and peoples with lived experience of racism. And so as part of that, we convened a national gathering on anti-Black racism, where we had 300 Black community leaders from across the country, so from coast to coast to coast, to really raise awareness about how the pandemic was colored by or affected by anti-Black racism and what the federal government should be doing with regards to that issue. Concomitantly, we also decided to set up a interdepartmental working group on the International Decade for People of African Descent. As we know, the federal government recognized the decade officially in 2018. And as a start, from budget 2018 and 2019, committed and invested $44 million to support work to combat anti-Black racism, particularly in terms of supporting Black youth, addressing mental health challenges and issues, and 3, supporting capacity building within Black communities. And in the town hall that we had convened with Black community leaders and members, there were some key areas that came out. So first, the area of business and economic development. So expanding opportunities for Black-led businesses and entrepreneurs, given that the barriers not only pre-existed COVID, but were becoming more extreme as COVID was impacting communities across the country. Housing, access to affordable housing and overcrowding was also, and homelessness were also key issues that were raised. The need to boost and enhance supports for Black communities addressing mental health. And also the fact that for community organizations to really put a dent in anti-Black racism across the board, there needs to be sustainable support, sustainable funding across the board, and more directed and specifically for Black communities. And so as a convener and a catalyst, so we take the information and then we share it with our colleagues across government to inform, as I say, the policy-making process. So that was in mid-2020. And since then, what we have seen that there's been a historic federal investment or commitment of over $500 million specifically earmarked for Black communities. And so for those of us who've been in this business for many years, we know and recognize that this is a historical fact, and never have we seen such a levels of commitment, both in the fall economic statement of 2020 and budget 2021, where there are the commitments that have been made. And so just to break down some of them, so we're looking at $200 million of funding to establish a philanthropic endowment fund specifically for Black communities. We're talking about $100 million to be invested to bolster the capacities of Black-led and Black-serving nonprofit organizations. We're talking about also over $51.7 million invested in supporting Black businesses on top of the committed over $93 million for the first Black entrepreneurship program. So that's just some of the commitments that we are seeing, and really reflects the commentary, the recommendations that Black community leaders and community members from across the country have been sharing with the Federal Secretariat, have been sharing with the Government of Canada, and working to ensure that they are transformed into actual programs, policies, and legislation. Another thing that we're working on is developing a whole of government anti-racism framework, which has a strong kind of understanding of anti-Black racism, to essentially inform how public servants across the board infuse anti-racism considerations, embed and direct them into all business lines. And so there are departments that are in the process of piloting the instrument, and we'll look forward to seeing it advance as we move forward. So you see, so from kind of playing the hub, the convener, and the catalyst role, how it's really an important instrument to advance substantive and systemic change within government. It's obviously a long-term process. We're talking about over 400 years of extreme anti-Black racism. And so I think what's key for us is really having the opportunity to partner and collaborate with individuals and organizations like those that you represent, because we're very much interested in understanding, as we roll out these commitments, what is the impact? Because yes, these are national funds, but they have a local impact. So we need to be very, very much attuned to the situations on the ground to see, are we missing the mark? Are we hitting the mark? Are there any more gaps that we need to be aware of? How do we fill those gaps? Are there lingering systemic barriers in terms of access, the ways in which our communities can access these funds, these supports? These are the types of things that the Federal Anti-Racism Secretariat need to know, and we're fully confident that with your expertise, your experience, your connections, that you have the essential knowledge base and learning that to share with us so that we can be effective in ensuring that the lived experiences of Black Canadians, people of African descent across the country improve sustainably and substantially across many different areas. And so that's why for us it's a big pleasure and honor for us to have this opportunity to speak with you, to describe a bit what the Federal Anti-Racism Secretariat does, and look forward to the opportunity to collaborate. And before I end, I must salute Denise, who we go way back, all the way to South Africa. In 20 years, the UN World Conference Against Racism. Anthony also, with whom I go back and advocated too in many different ways. And so great to see you here, and obviously Milena, also nice to see you, and Deputy Mayor also, who we've connected in the past. So again, thank you for having me, and I look forward to fruitful collaboration moving forward.
Thank you so much, Peter, for your presentation, and thank you for the great work that you're doing with the feds, and looking forward to the collaboration. Members, I wanted to ask if you have any questions for Peter. I'm just going to flip the screen. I know it's been a long day, but it's been a long, amazing day. I don't know about you, but I'm just starting to get energized. I'm like, wow, just getting started. I'm thrilled with respect to what I've heard. I am thrilled with the members of this body. I'm thrilled at looking forward to the work that we must do going ahead. So I'm looking to see if there's any questions. I don't see any questions. Looking now to see whether or not there are any speakers. Anyone wishing to speak on this item? And I'm flipping my screen around, and I don't see anyone with their hands up or any comments and so on. Okay, so members, we have concluded the 9 items, but let me just do this. Let's move to receive the presentation from Peter. So all those in favor of receiving the presentation? See show of hands, opposed, that's carried. Thank you. So we have concluded the 9 items that were on our agenda. It is now 5:44. We started our meeting at 2 o'clock, and as I said, I'm just getting started, but clearly we want to bring this matter to a close as this meeting. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to turn to the co-chair, Justice Betty, for closing comments, and then I will conclude, and then we will wrap this meeting up. Okay, Justice, can I turn it over to you? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, everyone. Incredible to see that there are 29 of us on this call. The word historic has been used many times today, but I would personally like to add inspiring, because under the leadership of the CABR and all of you, I'm feeling very, very optimistic about the path forward, and especially appreciate the wonderful presentations by representatives from the city, the province, and the federal government. We truly need all hands on deck, and I'm particularly excited about the diversity of experiences and expertise that all of us bring to the table, united by the common mission of confronting anti-Black racism. So with that, thank you again for your time. Wishing you all a safe and wonderful long weekend, and I'll turn it back to Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair, and it is a pleasure to have your comments. Members, we have reached the end of today's session. There is a lot that has been presented to us today, a lot to digest. So you have access to all the information vis-a-vis that staff have directed you to where you can find the information. I'm gleaning from some of the questions that's been asked and the comments have been made that your eyes with respect to your understanding of what the role of the city government and the varying departments doing, particularly in this area. There's a tremendous amount of work that's been done. I want to thank the leadership of Denise, Anania, Anthony, the amazing team, and everybody who's working to sort of, rise to the occasion, as Peter has indicated. I mean, this issue of racism and the backdrops associated with that, slavery and all of these different elements affecting Black people goes back many years and centuries. To be quite frank with you, we have an opportunity. We have an obligation. We are going to work together to collaborate to make the necessary changes and the efforts to doing so. But it's built based on foundation and structure. And I think that what you've heard today is that we have the varying foundational pieces that we have structured and so on, and we want to build on those to ensure that we can actually rise to the occasion and respond to the need in addressing the issues of confronting anti-Black racism. And what does that really mean? They're creating opportunities for people who are Black that are, in many instances, denied. It's interesting that we should understand the issues around racism. Many people don't see it, don't feel it, but we who are the recipient of it feel it, see it. The microaggression aspect of racism on a daily basis, and Peter has pointed out some numbers which are rather shocking, but I don't think for any of us it's surprising, quite frankly. I think it's something that we all know. But we do this work in order to affect change, to make our city, our province, and our country a better place for all. And I think it's consistent in the messaging that I'm hearing from everyone that we want to do this so that we're all better, and that that the opportunities for Blacks will be there, and we're going to ensure that we bring these all together. And we're going to work in a business-like manner to affect the change in order to, to get the desired outcome that we want. Everyone on this virtual call today bring a sense of brilliance, bring a tremendous wealth of knowledge and experience from your own different sectors and so on, but the lived experience, which is extremely important for us to sort of build on and so on. So we have a lot of work ahead. We will be in touch with you shortly, as I mentioned, about the Slack channel that I think that we should establish so that there could be ongoing dialogue, because the work is enormous that has to be done. And it can't just simply be that we meet, 4 times a year and then that's it, because that's not it. There's a lot of work to be done. I want to thank you all again very much for spending some time with us. And I don't have the date right at the moment for our next meeting, but we are going to work with staff, the co-chair and I, and we'll be responding to you later as to establishing the ongoing process of communicating and talking and looking at a variety of different subject matters relating to these issues. But I want to just simply do this before I close. I want to thank the mayor, as has been expressed, that the mayor has been very steadfast about affecting the change and addressing this issue. And of course, council, the city manager, and the whole team. And to all of you who have now been fortunate enough to be selected to be on this advisory committee. There's great expectation of you, and I know that you have great expectations of yourselves and so on in order to deliver. So I wish you all a great weekend. I wish you all the health in the world, and I also encourage you to stay safe. So with that, then, I would move a motion to adjourn the meeting. And just before I do, Mr. Clerk, I wondered if there's any issues or anything that you had before we close. I just wanted to turn over to you for a moment, just in case I may have missed anything. Yeah, I don't think I have, but
Thank you.
Just wanted. You're all good. Fantastic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have prepared a motion.
Okay.
To excuse the absence of a member from this meeting. I can display the motion for you.
Sure, and I'll read it. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, there it is. That the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee excuse the absence of Beverly Jean Daniel from the May 21st, 2021 meeting of the committee. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. I think I can see all hands. So that's been dealt with. All right. On that, I would like to wish everyone well, and I would like to move that this meeting is adjourned. All the best. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.